Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if neglected Naruto x possessive anko. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Scarface 101 and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1 Prologue. It was night time in Konoha, and one Anko Mitarashi was currently walking down the street with a takeout bag full of dango, a small spring in her step as she decided to spend the night binge watching her favorite movies in her apartment. It honestly would feel nice to just lounge around and relax instead of worrying about her curse mark or flipping off guys pestering her for dates. Some catcalls and whistles were heard from passerbys of the male variety, and the occasional female, but the snake mistress ignored them all, not even giving them a second glance. As she continued on her way, she spotted the form of one Naruto Uzumaki passing by and gave him a friendly wave, which he returned with a broad smile. Judging from the bags in his hand, it seemed like he had been grocery shopping. After their brief exchange, they continued to their respective homes without missing a step. Anko felt her mouth drool a bit as she could almost taste the dango on her tongue until she heard a small oof followed by the sound of a body and some items hitting the ground. She turned and spotted some civilian man with a bottle of sake in hand as he laughed at the fallen form of Naruto who was busy gathering some of his cup ramen back into his plastic grocery bags. Watch where you're going, filthy brat. The man spoke in a slightly slurred tone and then kicked the boy in the ribs, knocking him to the side. The civilian chuckled a bit as he stumbled along, but Anko felt her face heat up in anger, so she called out, "Hey, asshole." The man in question turned back around with a confused expression on his face and spoke, "You talking to me?" At his question, the purple-haired Kunoichi held her arm out and dropped her bag of dango to the ground and began walking forward, while in the background a group of civilians scattered and ran for their lives, knowing that if Anko drops her dango it usually spells disaster. "Yeah, I am talking to you, asshat. You see that kid there? He's got a name. It's not Brat. It's not Demon. Or Demon Brat. It is Naruto Uzumaki, and Naruto so happens to be a good buddy of mine." "Why?" "Might have to do with the fact we're both outcasts," she explained with her hands in her pockets as she stomped towards the man, who merely gave a cocky smirk and a scoff. "What's that got to do with anything?" The man slurred as he took a swig of his alcoholic beverage and let out an obnoxious belch sound. "Well, glad you asked. When fool civilians like you, who think they can do whatever they want, hurts a kid. Especially this one. It really gets me steamed up, and not in a good way." "In what way, you might ask?" "Like I want to do this," she yelled out, and then slammed her knee into his crotch, making his eyes bulge out in pain. "Or this," she screeched as she ripped the bottle from his hand, and then smashed it into his face, making glass explode in all directions on impact, and even some shards getting planted into his skin and flesh. She then grabbed him by the throat and began to repeatedly punch him in the face, making blood and saliva fly out from the force of the blows, followed by some rotten-looking and yellow teeth. Once she had beaten the man within an inch of his life, she pulled him to his feet and stared him directly in his nearly swollen shut eyes as she spoke. "You touch Naruto-kun again, and next time, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life eating your food through a straw. There are things much worse than death. I promise." With her point made, she tossed him to the side of the curb and then kicked him in the ribs hard enough to make a small crack noise as he whimpered and crawled to his feet, staggering away. After a moment of catching her breath, she came over to her blonde friend and spoke in concern. "You okay there? He didn't hurt you too bad, did he?" The whiskered teen gave a dismissive wave and replied, "He kicks like a fangirl. Just another annoyance. But won't you get in trouble if he reports you or something, Anko-chan?" "If he does, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. Though I'm pretty sure that Hokage-sama will let me off easy if I make mention that guy hurt you. Wouldn't be the first time I'd beaten up some punk-ass civilian getting too big for their britches," she replied and then collected her bag of dango. "So how's things at the academy going for ya?" she asked with a sweet smile, hoping and waiting for the day that she could take on a worthy apprentice and become a full-fledged jonin. But then she noticed a downcast look on his face and asked him, "Why the long face, Booya? You have been studying for the exams and all right?" The blonde nodded and replied with a small sigh, "Yeah. The written stuff I can handle at this point, but it's the jutsu portion I'm worried about. The substitution and henge I have down pat. But that bastard Irika won't tell me what it is that I'm doing wrong with the clone jutsu, and every time I ask for his help, he just replies in this snobbed tone, 'Just work harder, Naruto,' or he'll say sorry. I can't play favorites, Naruto. Shit. That fucking asshole. I shoulda known. No wonder you're stuck in the academy with a piss-poor teacher like that. Though I don't think it'd hurt if I gave you a few pointers on what you're doing wrong. Maybe show you a special trick to making stronger clones." The purple-haired woman replied and then affectionately pat him on the head, earning a large smile from him that made her heart flutter a bit. "Really? You'd do that for me? It'd really be a big help for me if I could figure out what's wrong with my clone jutsu." He spoke in gratitude, his smile continuing to grow wider as he now seemed to be bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Sure thing, Naruto-kun. I'd do anything for ya. And hey, if any of those civilian assholes are bullying you, you can come straight to me and I'll beat them up for ya. No questions asked?" Say you want to come over to my place for the night? She asked him while scratching her cheek a bit with a small blush. You sure that's okay? What about your roommate Kurenai? The blonde asked her, not wanting to inconvenience the two kunoichi with his presence. It's fine. I was gonna spend the night bumming around on the couch watching the Princess Gale movies. Kurenai's on a mission for the moment, should be back in time for the Genin graduation exams. Besides, I don't think it's safe for you to be alone right now, she replied as she jabbed a thumb in the direction of a passing group of men who seemed to be glaring at the two pariahs, most especially Naruto. Oh, good point. Seriously though, don't they have anything better to do than try to make my life miserable? The blonde boy asked with a mildly depressed sigh as Anko retrieved her bag of dango. Can't be helped. You're a constant reminder of the QB attack. Lot of people died that night, and instead of trying to accept the pain and move on with their lives, people seem to like having a convenient scapegoat to take their anger out on. I should know, Anko answered as she rubbed the back of her head with a frown. Oh, right. The Orochimaru thing and the curse mark. Any cure for that damned hickey been found yet? The blonde asked with some hope in his voice, knowing full well that the curse mark was both an unwanted reminder of her traitorous sensei, and a constant source of pain and discomfort. He couldn't help but notice that Anko bit her lip as he followed her to her apartment, her face taking on a sickeningly green color. Anko? Something wrong? You look kinda sick. The blonde pointed out, snapping the snake mistress from her lapse of attention. Why? Oh well, kinda sorta. There's this guy. Jiraiya. Self-proclaimed seal master, that sort of thing. Claims to have a cure for my curse mark, she replied in a somewhat distracted tone as she rubbed the nape of her neck and her shoulder where the mark was located. Really? Then what's the problem? The blonde asked with a raised eyebrow as they approached Anko's apartment complex. As she fished out the key from her pocket, the dango lover answered him, well, Jiraiya's a grade A pervert. He's dangling this cure over my head like a carrot to try and coerce me into having sex with him. I want to be cured, but I don't know for sure if this cure will actually work, and there's just some things I don't want to trade for anything. Not even being rid of the curse mark. At the end of her explanation, the blonde's face scrunched up as he spoke flatly. The bastard's blackmailing you for sex? That's just disgusting. Can't you report him or something? At the end of his question, Anko unlocked the door to her home and ushered the blonde inside, locking it behind them. Thought about it. I really want to, but it's way more complicated than that. I am kinda stuck right now, and I'm not sure what to do about the pervy asshole. It'd be my word against his with the sandame anyway. She muttered the last part in frustration, her fist tightening into a white-knuckle grip. What was that last bit? I didn't hear. Naruto asked as he placed his groceries on the kitchen counter, wondering what his best friend was talking about under her breath. It's nothing. Forget about it. Anyways, let's just enjoy the night, yeah? Anko replied with a broad smile, putting on her usual boisterous mask which didn't go unnoticed by the blonde, but he chose not to comment on it, instead deciding it was better just to have some fun instead of talking about depressing stuff. Appreciating his understanding since he wasn't going to pressure her on the subject, she placed her bag of dango on the table resting in front of the couch, and then popped in the first Princess Gale film to start off their movie night. With that done, she plopped herself down on the couch with Naruto following right behind her. As the opening scene and credits of the movie played, Anko muttered just loud enough for her friend to hear, I'm glad you're my friend Naruto-kun. It means a lot to me. The truth was, Anko was very much in love with Naruto, even though she couldn't admit it out loud at this time, not to mention there was something of an age difference, but it wasn't that wide a gap. And if he became a genin, then he would also become a legally registered adult according to village laws. Still, he was so young and innocent, and somewhat dense when it comes to romance, so she didn't want to force her feelings onto him until he'd matured a bit more. Same here. I don't think I would have made it for very long without you. You've done a lot for me over the years, Anko-chan. I promise to someday find a cure for your curse mark, and if the one this Jiraiya guy claims to have is the real thing, then I'll just beat it out of him. His promise earned a small giggle from her, but she nodded in appreciation all the same for his enthusiasm. At last, things started to move along in their film, so they continued to enjoy each other's company as Anko opened her bag of dango and alternated from popping one in her mouth to placing one in her favorite blonde's waiting mouth. Kushina-sama. I'll look after your son for you. No matter what, she thought silently as she fondly remembered the woman who had taken care of her after Orochimaru's betrayal. Anko then smiled warmly, feeling utterly and truly happy right now in Naruto's company. His happiness, love, and affection meant everything to her, and no one, not on Kami's green earth, would dare bring harm unto him if she had a say in the matter. No one. For years she had suffered in the village ever since her former sensei had abandoned Konoha and left her for dead after using her as a guinea pig for his curse mark. People would always look at her with disdain, muttering behind her back that she was some kind of double agent, that she was still the traitor's whore, and then they began circulating rumors that she was a slut who took on many seduction missions to make her look like some kind of sex addict, all of which was false since she was still a virgin to this day, and was saving her first time for that special someone. Naruto, as mentioned earlier, was similar to her in many ways, and perhaps more importantly he had unconditionally accepted her in spite of the rumors and slander. That kindness alone meant the world to her. In some ways, Naruto was her guiding light in this harsh, cruel, and unforgiving world filled with darkness and hypocrisy. As the night dragged on and they watched movie after movie, the hours started to tick by. Anko looked down and noticed that the whiskered teen had already fallen asleep, his head now resting on the side of her breast. With a small smile she gently maneuvered his body so that his head now rested on her lap, a small blush and a happy smile on her face as she gently massaged his scalp, her fingers running through his hair as she looked down at his peaceful expression. She could feel butterflies flitting about in her stomach, and a pleasing warmth with each beat of her heart inside her chest. This is true happiness, she muttered to herself. She then picked him up in a bridal carry and brought him into her bedroom to place him on the bed, being sure not to wake him up as she pulled the sheet onto his sleeping frame. With a satisfied sigh, she pulled off her trademark trench coat and tossed in a random direction, followed by the mesh armor that barely kept her modesty, and then the rest of her clothing were tossed about the room until at last she was as naked as the day she was born. Licking her lips in a sensual manner, she slowly creeped up towards the blonde, then slowly slipped into her bed and snuggled up against his body, her breast taking his arm into her cleavage as her hand snaked upwards to his face, and she began to trace a finger along his signature whisker marks. Soon. Very soon. Someday soon. You'll be all mine. And we can live together in happiness, she whispered to herself as her eyes drifted closed, and she fell into a deep slumber. For some reason, whenever she slept with Naruto like this, it felt like she could forget the scorn of the village, and the pain caused by her curse mark would melt into nothingness. It was in moments like these that she felt truly happy. The next morning, Anko's eyes fluttered open as she stretched her limbs with a yawn, groaning a bit in disappointment that Naruto was no longer in bed with her. Instead there was a note on her nightstand. She picked it up and read the words on it. Sorry for leaving you, Anko-chan, but gotta get to the academy on time. Could you please hold on to my groceries for a bit till I come back to pick them up? Would be appreciated. P.S. Your tits are as soft as ever. She couldn't help but giggle at that last part as she got up, her nose scrunching up as she caught the familiar scent of coffee. Raising an eyebrow, she left her bedroom and found her roommate Kurenai sitting at the dining table while sipping at a mug of coffee. Morning. I met Naruto on his way out. I see you invited him to stay the night again. And you slept with him naked again. The crimson-eyed woman spoke in a flat tone of voice. Yeah. I didn't see the harm of letting him stay. And come on, it's not like I do anything nasty to him. We just cuddle, and he actually likes it when I'm nude. Anywho, you're back a bit sooner than I expected. Anko noted as she sat across from the genjutsu mistress, the dango lover having a happy expression on her face. Anko, we need to have a talk. A serious talk. Kurenai stated as she pushed a second mug of coffee in the snake user's direction, the purple-haired woman picking it up and taking a sip before asking in a lazy tone, about what? I am a bit concerned about your relationship with Naruto. I know about your feelings for him, and I don't think that pursuing a relationship of the romantic kind would be very good for you, Kurenai stated in a more gentle tone of voice, and then seemed a bit saddened as her friend was now glaring at her. Excuse me? Nai-chan. I love you like a sister. You've always been good to me, and had my back whenever I needed it. Hell, I even held my tongue and quietly supported your relationship with Asuma. But you can't do the same for me and Naruto-kun? He's a good kid, he's sweet, gentle, understanding, and Anko began to list off but was then cut off by her friend. And still a child. Anko, you're an adult woman. I know how much you care for him, but you have a nasty habit of being rather clingy, and your obsession with him has become somewhat unhealthy. Shouldn't you try and find someone more age-appropriate? Someone you can truly be happy with? The crimson-eyed woman asked with a worried expression, trying not to push Anko's buttons in the wrong way since she was known to be hostile when matters involved Naruto. Uzumaki, I tried. I did. I went on a few dates here and there. All of them kept giving me this look. Like hungry dogs eyeing a piece of meat. They all wanted the same thing. All they wanted was to try and fuck me because I'm the so-called snake whore, but Naruto's different. He doesn't look at me that way, and whenever I'm around him these feelings well up inside me. And I just can't picture myself with being anyone but him. So what if there's an age gap? It's not that wide anyway. I'm not some old granny with a foot in the grave. The snake mistress argued as she slammed her fist down on the table. He doesn't look at you like that because he doesn't understand what it truly is you want with him. He is a boy still going through puberty. And sure, he is taking notice of girls and women, but he is still ignorant when it comes to sexual relationships. If you try to push your feelings onto him and have sex with him, then you could. The genjutsu mistress tried to rationalize, but her voice fell silent as Anko stared at her, as though she wanted to burn a hole through her skull. Shut up. Naruto-kun needs me. More than anyone. I have cared for and protected him for years. I fed him whenever he didn't have enough money for food. I cared for him when he was sick. I tutored him when he struggled in his studies. I protected him from the more violent elements of the village. Me. Not the Hokage. Not that useless-ass Jiraiya. Me. All me. I love Naruto-kun, and no one is going to take him from me. Anko shouted angrily, her face flushed red as she snarled a bit. A small tear came down from Kurenai's face as she replied, I see, then I wish the best for you. I can see there's no persuading you otherwise. There was something else I wanted to talk about, I'm leaving. The genjutsu user spoke, snapping Anko from her anger. Leaving? The fuck you talking about? Anko asked, not sure what her longtime friend meant by that. It's time I started to move on with my life. Asuma and I are going to move into an apartment together. We're taking our relationship to the next level, Kurenai explained with a small smile of affection crossing her lips. Oh, I'm so happy for you. Anko replied in a bitter voice, feeling somewhat betrayed by Kurenai for not accepting that she wanted to be with Naruto, and for up and leaving her all high and dry like this. I'm sorry, Anko, but I promised to come and visit. And me moving out isn't the end of the world. We can still be friends, but I'm tired of being labeled as the Ice Queen of Konoha. I just want to settle down with a nice boyfriend and move on. I don't want to be some kunoichi that acts cold-hearted all the time. Kurenai spoke as she rubbed her temples, feeling somewhat drained now that she'd had her talk with Anko. She could clearly see the hurt look on her friend's face. The crimson eyes woman tried to place a comforting hand on top of Anko's own, but the snake user snatched her hand away, refusing to look at her friend. I'll come back to get my things later. I need to turn in my mission report anyway. Kurenai spoke softly as she left, deciding it'd be better to leave Anko alone so she can process everything. As Kurenai opened the apartment door to leave, Anko spoke up, remember that promise we made? To Kushina-sama? We promised we'd look after her baby no matter the cost, no matter who we had to kill, or who we had to hurt to keep him safe, that we would love and cherish him above all else? Doesn't that promise mean anything to you now? At her questioning, the genjutsu mistress looked over her shoulder with a small frown on her face. We were children then, Anko. We promised a lot of things. But Kushina is gone. And nothing will ever bring her back, Kurenai replied flatly, which earned a chuckle from her longtime friend. You aren't moving on with your life, Nai-chan. You're running away from your responsibilities. The responsibilities that really matter. And when you are faced with the sins of abandoning Naruto-kun, I will very happily say I told you so. By the way, if you're seriously moving in with Asuma, tell him to do something about his chain smoking. Shinobi work is hazardous enough without adding lung cancer to the mix. Anko spoke in a half-serious and half-mocking voice which earned a small nod from Kurenai since the snake user made a valid point on the lung cancer comment, and then departed, leaving the snake user to sigh deeply and continue to drink what was left of her coffee, her mood now seriously soured, her eyes glancing over the bag of foodstuffs that Naruto had left behind. Come to think of it, did Naruto-kun have time to make a bento? God damn it. He probably took the high road and went to the academy without taking any food with him, even after I told him he can help himself to what's in the kitchen if he ever gets hungry. She muttered and began to hurry about her kitchen to make a meal for her favorite blonde. After all, one can't properly study at the academy, especially in Irika's class, on an empty stomach. Later on, hee. I'm bringing Naruto-kun lunch. I feel kinda like a waifu right now. Anko Mitarashi, sexy, sadistic, and loving waifu to my little Naruto-kun. I love the sound of that, Anko muttered to herself happily, her previous anger against Kurenai now forgotten as her mind now seemed solely focused on the Kyuubi's container. As she neared the academy, she stopped for a second as she heard what sounded like arguing, and one of the voices definitely belonged to Naruto. Peering around the corner of the academy's gates, she spotted the whiskered teen in some kind of argument with one Sakura Haruno. Hey! Don't speak that way about Anko-chan, Naruto shouted, making the snake user raise an eyebrow, wondering why she was the subject of their argument. I can say whatever I want about her. And don't think that I don't know what's going on here. You're just trying to make me think that you have a fetish for older women so that I'll get jealous and try to prove that I'm much more of a woman than that snake whore. Nice try, but Sasuke-kun's the one for me. Sakura spoke as she crossed her arms with a haughty-looking grin on her face. Firstly, that doesn't make sense. Secondly, Anko-chan will always be 100 times the woman you are. And thirdly, a loud-ass holler monkey like you, and the brooding Amo king deserve each other. And Anko's not a whore. She's one of the most hardworking, loyal, and loving kunoichi I've ever met. And someday when I'm Hokage, I'm gonna make her my wife, Naruto shouted, his words making Anko's heart flutter. If he wanted her to be his wife, then he must seriously have feelings for her. Feelings of love. Please. My daddy says that her sensei was Orochimaru, and that she would suck his at the snap of his fingers, and they did all kinds of nasty and dirty things with their snake summons. At her words, Naruto clenched his fist and stomped towards her as if he wanted to slug her across the face. But then he stopped and gripped the front of her shirt, pulling her towards him until his face was only a few inches from her own. Normally, I would have clocked you for that, but it wouldn't be fair to hit you for whatever lies your dad's been telling you. Anko's not a whore. Not a slut. Not an nympho, and not a traitor. She's paid her dues and proven time and again she's a loyal kunoichi. It's not her fault she had Orochimaru for a sensei, and for the record she's actually still a virgin. If you keep on talking shit about my crazy snake lady, then I'll be happy to settle things with you during class spars. The blonde threatened at the end with a grin that would easily make the snake mistress herself proud as the pinkette paled. Saying good things about me, Naruto-kun? Asked a familiar voice behind him, causing him to release Sakura as he turned was met with the form of the Dango lover herself. "Oh hey Anko-chan, fancy seeing you here, hee hee, how much did you hear?" he asked at the end while slumping his shoulders. "More than enough. Gonna make me your wife, huh? Think you're man enough to handle me?" she asked with a sweet smile that she tried to fill with as much venom as possible to make it seem like she was mad but failed since nothing but happiness and warmth filled her face. "Heh. If I can't satisfy my wife then I'd be a pretty disgraceful Hokage. Scratch that, I wouldn't even be able to call myself a man," he answered with a sheepish grin as he rubbed the back of his head. "Oh? You been reading up on the birds and the bees or something behind my back?" she asked while lightly punching him on the shoulder, making him shrug in response as if to say maybe. "Oh, by the way. What brings you here?" he asked her, finding it a little strange that she would come to the academy of all places. At his question, the purple-haired woman held out the bento she had made for him, and he took it from her hands, now realizing why she had come. "You made a bento just for me?" he asked with some tears welling up in his eyes. "Told ya I'd do anything for ya," was her reply, a somewhat smug grin on her face as Naruto took her by surprise and wrapped his arms around her neck, pulling her into a kiss. Her eyes widened in surprise then slowly closed in bliss as she returned the kiss. Meanwhile, inside her mind, a chibi Anko was dancing waving around a sign that said victory. She was a little sad when they had to break the kiss, but the need for air made it necessary. Then suddenly Anko got an idea as a light bulb seemed to blink over her head. "Naruto-kun? There's something I want to talk to you about when you get out of the academy," she spoke, planning on inviting him to live with her in her apartment, since Kurenai was moving out. Looking back on it now, maybe it was a blessing in disguise. "Go suck face someplace else, creeps," spoke the form of Sakura, ruining the moment, making Anko's face drop into a scowl. She then put on a sickly sweet smile and turned to the pinkette, slowly stepping towards her almost like a feline ready to pounce on its prey. "Listen to me, very closely, Harino-san. Naruto-kun is the most precious thing in the world to me. And he tells me that you like to occasionally use him for a human punching bag. If I learn of your continued abuse towards him, I promise to kidnap you, lock you away somewhere where nobody will ever find you, no matter how much you scream. Maybe I'll leave you for the rats to munch on, maybe I'll leave you down there to starve to death, or maybe I'll just cut apart your womanhood so you can't breed. The last thing we need is you procreating more Harunos." Anko threatened in a chilling voice, making Sakura pale and then run away in tears, trying to put as much distance between herself and the crazy snake lady. Yup. Just another satisfying day to be Anko Mitarashi. The only thing that could top this would be if Kushina crawled out from the grave and gave her blessing for her and Naruto-kun to marry. Meanwhile, "What do you mean that you haven't made any progress?" spoke the form of a goggle-wearing man named Torian, a close subordinate, an aide to Danzo Shimura, as he and his partner Fu Yamanaka walked down the hallways of a hidden root facility that had been recycled from an abandoned Orochimaru laboratory. "Exactly as I said. The subject's mind is exceptionally complex and has repeatedly detected every attempt to dig around inside her mind, and accordingly repelled the mental probes. Even with the drugs keeping her in a medically induced coma, if I poke and prod too much, it is still possible for her to regain self-awareness and possibly awaken. It's a very delicate procedure we're dealing with here," explained the orange-haired man in a frustrated voice, making his partner shake his head, as they both eyed the form of one Kushina Uzumaki, her form lying in a hospital bed as machinery constantly pumps drugs into her to keep her in a state of limbo. "Danzo-sama won't be pleased. He seems to think that Yuzo holds the secrets to true immortality and longevity," Torian muttered as he crossed his arms. "Might be a kernel of truth to that belief. Kushina has spent over a decade in a comatose state but shows absolutely no signs of aging or even muscle atrophy. If it weren't for the drugs, I'm certain she'd wake up and kill us all. And that wouldn't be the worst of it." Fu spoke with a shudder. "Not the worst? This is Kushina, the evil Uzumaki we are talking about. Back during the wars, she was known to scalp her victims for fun. She tortured, maimed, burnt, crucified, castrated, disemboweled, and beheaded people every single day and laughed about it all like it was a joke. What could be the worst thing she could do?" Torian asked skeptically, fully aware of the woman's ferocious reputation. "She could become the Hokage." The orange-haired man replied as his face paled in terror, causing his partner's mouth to drop open for a moment before he nervously nodded in agreement at the thought. Hiruzen Sarutobi was currently little more than a glorified paper pusher at this point of time in his old age, but if the likes of Kushina took over, then she'd steamroll her way over everyone just to get what she wanted, without care of consequence. Unknown to them, a small smirk crossed Kushina's face and her hand twitched slightly before clenching into a fist. Later that day, Sakura Haruno growled as another school day had passed and Sasuke had still ignored her. And now Naruto seemed like he was going to ignore her just as well for some old whore. "Freaking stupid dead last, what's that Anko bitch got that I don't?" The pinkette muttered angrily to herself as she cut through an alleyway to get home as quickly as possible, until she bumped into someone who rounded the corner, causing the fangirl to fall to the ground. "Nice tits. Great ass, questionable but sexy sense of fashion. And a badass can-do attitude. What you got going for you, Pinkie Pie?" asked the form of Anko, who was now standing above Sakura with a cocky grin. the pinkette sighing in frustration as she got up and dusted herself off. The hell do you want now? Wait, were you following me? Sakura asked, feeling it was kind of staged how she just randomly bumped into the snake whore again. Maybe a bit. There was something I forgot to tell you. Something that I couldn't say in front of everyone else at the academy, especially Naruto-kun. Anko replied in a jovial manner as she walked towards Sakura with an exaggerated sway to her hips. Oh yeah? What's that? The fangirl asked while swallowing a lump in her throat as she slowly backed away, feeling far more in danger than ever before in her sheltered life as the only daughter of the Haruno family. Here's the thing. I want to take Naruto-kun as my apprentice when he graduates, of which I shall personally guarantee this time. Problem is, the Sandaime says that if I did that, then there would be one less student, and then there'd be the issue of an incomplete team, and most unluckily there aren't any stand-ins. So my request for an apprentice was sadly denied, Anko explained as her grin became wider and wider until it seemed like the corners of her mouth were ready to tear open. And? The heck does that have to do with me? Sakura asked, not sure where this conversation was going. Well, if I can't take Naruto-kun as my apprentice, then he'll end up on Team 7, which is traditionally made up of the class's members with the lowest and highest scores, and the top-ranked kunoichi. In essence, you, Naruto-kun, and Sasuke. The only solution to fixing this issue is you need to vanish for a little while. Anko replied in a cheerful voice as she put her hands on her hips. We vanish? Sakura whimpered out in confusion, then out of nowhere, a pair of arms wrapped around her neck and a rag was placed over her mouth. She tried to scream and call for help, but nothing but muffled yelps came out. Anko sighed as she watched with a blank and dispassionate expression as she casually pulled out a stick of gum then popped into her mouth. Sakura's struggles grew quieter and quieter until finally she passed out with a small moan. Thanks for the help, Yugao-chan. Anko spoke to a Nico-masked Umbu with purple hair who was now carrying the pinkette over her shoulders as though the girl were a sack of potatoes. If it's for Naruto-kun's benefit, then of course. What do you want me to do with the girl? I could chop her up into tiny pieces, have Hana-chan feed the meat to the dogs. No one will ever know. The Umbu captain offered, her voice having some sadistic pleasure to it. Thought about it. But she might be more useful alive. This little brat is Kizashi Haruno's kid, and his only meal ticket to get his grubby fingers into the Uchiha fortune. Might be handy to hang on to her for a while. Put her in that place, and I'll handle the rest from there. Anko replied as she walked towards her apartment with a devilish grin to her face. Send Naruto-kun my regards. Was all the Umbu woman said before vanishing in a swirl of leaves with Sakura. After a few minutes of walking, the snake user arrived back at her apartment where Kurenai seemed to be gathering the last of her personal belongings, the crimson-eyed woman having a saddened expression on her face. Hi. She spoke in a quiet voice and awkwardly waved to Anko who waved back, the purple-haired Dango lover replying, Hey Nai-chan? I'm not mad at you anymore. I know you meant well and only wanted the best for me. But this stuff with Naruto-kun is something for me and him to settle, and just earlier today, I learned that he actually cared for me in that way. So Anko left the sentence hanging, knowing that Kurenai got the picture. I see. I am sorry for being so pushy earlier. I just didn't want you to make some foolish mistake and get hurt over it. I remember when you first came back after getting branded with the curse mark, you were so gloomy and despondent. You barely ate or slept after that, and I didn't want you to have a second experience. If you and Naruto-kun can have a life together, I truly wish you the best. The genjutsu user spoke with a small smile, hoping to make amends before departing. Ah. Just like you. The protective big sister type. Well, don't worry about me, Nai-chan. I can handle myself. I ain't some naive tween anymore. Anywho, you look out for yourself, okay? And I like to keep an open door policy, so if you need a hand or a place to crash, give me a holler. The Dango lover offered and was then pulled into a hug by the crimson-eyed woman. The two sharing a chaste kiss before Kurenai picked up her belongings. I left my key on the kitchen counter with a bag of your favorite dango, call it a goodbye present. I'll be seeing you again soon, Anko-chan. I hope you find a good roommate. With that said, the genjutsu user walked away feeling that they'd cleared the air. It was at this moment that Naruto had arrived and saw the form of Kurenai leaving, making a puzzled expression appear on his face as he approached his best friend and crush. Hey, did something happen between you and Kurenai-san? Naruto asked with a bit of concern as he placed a hand on Anko's shoulder. Nai-chan's leaving. She's moving in someplace with the Suma. Moving on with her life, she said. That kinda brings me to what I wanted to talk to you about earlier. I'm in the market for a new roommate, and I think you'd make a good candidate. She answered with a toothy smile, making Naruto's mouth drop open. Me? You want me to live with you? He asked, feeling his heart thundering in his chest from pure happiness at the thought of living with Anko. He could finally move out of his crummy apartment, and into someplace way better, the same place as his crush no less. Sure I do. Hell, you practically live here anyway. She exclaimed and then patted his head affectionately. A somewhat fiendish grin came on her face as she continued to speak. I just have a few rules. 1. In our apartment together we spend our days inside our home together in the nude. 2nd, you will refer to me from here on as Anko-sama or sensei since I plan to take you as my apprentice. 3rd, I want you to live as happily as possible. If there's something you ever need to discuss with me, if you ever need anything, or if you just want a warm body to cuddle with, you just let me know. Deal?" At that, he nodded his head and replied, "You've got a deal, Anko-chan." "But do we really need to be naked all the live long in our apartment together?" he asked with a large blush. He always knew that Anko was kinda perverted, but this seemed a bit excessive. "Ah, come on. My apartment, my rules. Besides, I cuddle with you in the nude, so what's the big deal? And one other thing, you use chan not sama. Anko-sama's going to punish you now." She spoke in a jovial tone as she grabbed him and pushed his face into her chest, earning some muffled yells since he couldn't breathe between her breasts. Eventually he gave up his struggles and sighed between her breasts. This actually wasn't the bad kind of punishment, to be honest. Anko then raised an eyebrow as she felt some moisture build up in her cleavage as she pulled back and found that Naruto was crying tears of joy. "Anko-sama. I love you. Please be with me forever. Forever and always, Naruto-kun. I love you too. And if you go before I do, then I'll tell the grave digger that he'd better dig too," she promised him and ushered him inside the apartment, closing and locking the door behind him, and then immediately discarded all of her clothing, giving the blonde boy a clear view of her nude form. Sure, she had cuddled naked with him, but it was usually dark, and he tried not to peek too much. "Get used to the view. You'll be seeing a lot of this fine ass." She spoke bluntly and then smacked her own butt, making her round-ass cheek shake a bit. "Extra thick," Naruto muttered as he dryly swallowed, feeling the blood rush to a certain place between his legs. "Damn straight, boy. Discard those clothes. You don't get to wear anything but a smile in my home. And if you need to do something about that boner, take it out in the bathroom or something. Till you strap on the headband, you're not legal age." She spoke with a wink, prompting the blonde boy to run into the bathroom to take care of some business. "Oh, this is going to be fun," she spoke to herself, knowing that it would be a joy to tease him. And judging from the tent in his crotch, he definitely wasn't some average Joe. Most likely he had his Uzumaki genes and the QB to thank for that. "Are we going too fast?" "Maybe. Yeah, definitely. But fuck it," the dango lover muttered with a happy smile, a certain spring in her step as she headed towards the kitchen to munch on the dango left behind by her now ex-roommate. Retrieving the bag of goodies, she plopped herself down on the couch and began to eat the sweet treats. "With the little pink monkey girl out of the way, I just need to make sure Naruto-kun passes the exam this time. A little training in shadow clones should do the trick. Kakashi will apprentice that little Uchiha shit. And I'll have Naruto-kun for myself. It's a shame that Kushina-sama isn't here. Hope I'm doing her proud." Meanwhile, Root Lab. Fu sighed to himself as he approached the bed where Kushina Uzumaki slept peacefully, unaware and trapped in a never-ending dream. The orange-haired man sighed, since this would possibly be the 1,000th time he's attempted to sneak into her mind and steal the secrets of Yuzu. While it was unlikely he'd uncover anything worthwhile, it was still a necessary evil to keep Kushina in a comatose state, since she was a threat to Konoha if not the entire elemental nations. "Hey there, sunshine," spoke a female voice, prompting Fu to turn around to see the form of Kushina sitting upright on the bed. The root agent's mouth opening and closing as wheezing sounds came from his mouth, for the evil Uzumaki had finally awoken. Then in a flash of movement, Kushina cut open his throat with a scalpel, making blood leak down his neck as he clutched at the wound, falling to the floor as he gasped and choked on his own blood. The evil Uzumaki's face scrunched up slightly as she asked, "You look familiar. Did I threaten to murder your family or something?" At her question, she only received some gurgling noises. She shrugged her shoulders, then continued to speak. "Oh well, if I can't remember your name, I'm guessing that you're one of those unimportant throwaway type characters. I'll take an educated guess and say that you're the asshole that's been trying to mind rape me, learn some of Yuzu's secrets, all on that Danzo guy's orders. And I've been pumped full of drugs to keep in dreamland. That about sum it up?" she asked the orange-haired man, and finally with a final gasp, he fell to the floor, having mercifully expired. "I'll take that as a yes," Kushina replied as she got up from the slab and cracked her neck a few times. Then stretched her limbs to allow some of her joints to pop, and then glanced over at a mirror and asked herself, "Okay now. 3 very important questions. Has the Chucky franchise finally ended? How long have I been under? And most importantly, where the fuck is my child? Well, I know a certain old monkey that can help answer those questions." End Chapter 1. Chapter 2. A Smile That Can Kill. Kushina's return. It had been just a little over a day since Naruto had moved in with Anko, taking what few worthwhile belongings he had to her, or their, shared apartment. And now with the genin exams coming tomorrow, it was time to train. Though there was currently a question that the blonde boy was still curious about. "Remind me again, sensei, why must we be naked in our apartment at all times?" asked the form of Naruto Uzumaki as he followed his new roommate and sensei towards training ground 7, since the snake user had promised him a clone jutsu that was sure to help him finally pass the academy exam and flip the bird at Irika in the process. "This again? What? Too good a view or something? I told you already, it is training," Anko half yelled with a mocking laugh at the end, almost as if she knew something the blonde didn't. "And how is strutting around naked involve training? And what if people come by and we're still naked?" he asked in a deadpan tone, since he had to fight off numerous nosebleeds when Anko got a little aggressive in her flirting. "Sheesh. I sometimes forget that you're still a kid since you act all mature sometimes. We can just put on a hinge to hide our nudity, then slip away into the bedroom for a minute to throw on some clothes. And there's a number of kunoichi in the world that dress provocatively to distract their enemies. And I'm one of them. If you can keep your cool and avoid getting distracted by an enemy kunoichi's body, then you'll have a bit easier time in battle with the kind of kunoichi that use seduction techniques. Anko explained as she crossed her arms, a confident grin on her face since Naruto nodded in understanding. Wait, does that seriously work? He asked while scratching at his whiskered cheeks, now having a better understanding on why so many kunoichi like Anko and Kurenai dressed in revealing or skimpy outfits. With killer bodies like theirs, it'd be hard not to get distracted. Not always, but you'd be surprised at the number of guys that think with what's between their legs instead of their heads. Sometimes works on women too if they're bisexual, lesbian, or have insecurities in their own bodies. The snake user answered with a small chuckle. Right, so what's the jutsu that you're going to be teaching me? Naruto asked, hoping to move things along. Plus he was feeling both excited and impatient at the prospect of finally leaving the academy and learning a new jutsu. Okay. Hold your horses. It's called the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Unlike the plain academy-taught clone jutsu which only produces illusionary decoys, the Shadow Clone Jutsu makes solid copies which make for good body doubles. One of the most useful aspects of the Shadow Clones are that when they dispel, whatever they learn is transferred to the caster. So this technique is good for scouting and infiltration. The downside is that it takes a lot of chakra to use, but with your unnatural chakra reserves, this technique should be a snap for you. She explained, earning a nod from her favorite blonde boy. Naruto cracked his knuckles a bit, very eager to start his training, then he paused as a question mark blinked over his head since a thought had just crossed his mind. Wait a sec, the Sandaime Hokage knows the Shadow Clone Jutsu, right? He's called the professor for knowing a large variety of techniques. Why doesn't he just use the clones to help do his paperwork? The blonde asked, voicing his thought on the subject, which earned a chuckle from the snake mistress. Heh. You caught on too? Finally. I thought I was the only one to notice. My thoughts are, the old man's getting senile. She responded with a hearty laugh, making the Kyuubi Jinchuriki sweat drop a bit. You knew and never said anything? He asked as his eyebrow twitched a bit, wondering why Anko withheld that piece of information from Hiruzen. Yeah. This might be petty, but it's kind of like payback for me. The Sandaime's always been soft on his students, like my ex-sensei. Orochimaru became a missing nin. Tsunade's been wandering around drinking and gambling while in mourning for 15 fucking years. As for student number 3, where the fuck do I even begin? She spoke, though that last question seemed more to herself. With a shrug, she sighed and then gave a toothy smile as she spoke. Anyway, don't sweat the small stuff. Time to train. I'll show you the hand sign for the Shadow Clone Jutsu, and then you can give it a go, She paused as she looked up towards the sky, with Naruto also following her gaze. In the skies above Konoha were filled with hundreds, or even thousands of numerous species of native birds were flying away from the village almost as if they were fleeing from something, since the panic chirping and squawking sounds could be heard even at this distance. The hell is that about? Seems kinda like a bad omen. Naruto muttered. While he was no expert on bird behavior, it didn't take an expert to see that the birds fleeing in such numbers wasn't a good sign. Anko's eyes narrowed a bit as a tingling sensation ran up and down her spine. She's back, she finally came back. Anko whispered just loud enough for the blonde to hear her. The snake user recognized the signs and even now could feel in her gut and her heart that her mistress had finally returned. Who's back? Naruto asked, feeling a little bit nervous all of a sudden as he swallowed a lump in her throat. Don't be surprised if we get company later. Anko replied in a cryptic manner. She then clapped her hands together, snapping him to attention, and spoke, don't worry about that stuff right now. Time to train. With that last shout, she began to show him the needed hand sign for the shadow clones. However, Naruto now had a feeling that something was coming his way, and his life would be flipped upside down. Meanwhile, in the office of the Hokage, Hiruzen was sitting behind his desk smoking from his favorite pipe. Standing in front of him was a man with pink hair who was red in the face and was shouting at the top of his lungs in outrage. My daughter is missing and you aren't doing anything about it. That snake whore was seen and heard threatening my precious Sakura just yesterday at the academy, and then my daughter vanished. That slut Anko is obviously suspicious, Kizashi shouted angrily with his hands clenched tightly into fists as he slammed them onto the desk. I have some of my umbu investigating the matter. Anko will be questioned, of course. Just like the many other people who all loathe the Horino name because of you, Kizashi-san. The Sandaime replied flatly as he blew some smoke from his nostrils. The ex-shinobi's eyebrow twitched a bit, and he grit his teeth, growling out, there's something you wish to say to me, Hiruzen? At this question, the Hokage's eyes hardened as he put down his pipe and rose to his full height to stare down the head of the civilian council. That is Hokage-sama, to you. And there are a great many things I very much desire to say, and most of them cannot be spoken in polite conversation. But above all, I wish Kushina killed you all those years ago, when she exposed you for accepting sexual favors from captured enemy kunoichi. You, Kizashi, have become a parasite much like my former student Orochimaru. Leeching off of the lives of others to feed your own ego. You have trampled on many lives with your business as a loan shark. Reportedly, A number of your clients have committed suicide due to their debts to your business. And many more continue to suffer with you as the civilian council's head. For years, I have maintained the peace of the village, yet you seek to continue to undermine the ninjas that work hard, every day to protect that peace and this village. And now here you are, now making demands of me when you need my shinobi, when it is your own sins that have likely damned your child. Hiruzen spoke with pure hatred for this leech standing before him. Before their argument could escalate further, a voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "Hello, boys," spoke a very familiar voice, prompting both men to turn in the direction it came from and saw the form of Kushina Uzumaki herself, standing in the doorway with a rust-covered katana resting on her shoulder. "Couldn't help but overhear you too. Kizashi, you actually managed to procreate and make a daughter? Thought I castrated you by squishing your peanut-sized testicles under my feet when I kicked you out of the shinobi corps. Next time I'll be sure to finish the job." She spoke with a broad smile as she approached the pictures of the Hokage hanging off the wall. The two men opened and closed their mouths, as if they were both fish out of water, both unable to speak due to pure shock. But Kizashi was the first to speak as he pointed an accusatory finger at the crimson-haired woman and shouted, "You! It was you! It's because of you that my daughter went missing." Kushina chuckled a bit, and then accidentally knocked off the picture of the shodaime from the wall with the tip of her sword before speaking. "Don't know what you're talking about. I only just arrived back in Konoha about an hour ago. The Chunin manning the gate's guard post, Kotetsu and Izumi, were very accommodating to me, must have been crushing pretty hard on me. And trust me, Kizashi, I wouldn't waste my time kidnapping whatever brat that slithered out of yours and Mabuki's collective filth. I'd just kill you and get the job done. Now shoo. Go away. The grown-ups are about to have a lovely chat." She spoke at the end with a sweet voice that sent chills up the men's spines. Seeing that Kizashi still hadn't left yet, she pointed the tip of her rust-caked sword at him and spoke in an even sickeningly sweeter voice. "So silly of me. I shouldn't be asking. I'm telling you to fuck off and get out of my sight." This time, the message got clear across and the pink-haired man fled the office as quickly as possible, causing the doors to slam behind him in his haste. "Remind me to pour a very big jug of bleach down his throat. Now then, Hiruzen, you've gotten so old. It's a miracle that you haven't kicked the bucket or that Konoha's not been burnt to the ground with it being in such a state," Kushina remarked with a small giggle, and then accidentally knocked off the picture of the knighting. What do you mean in such a state? And perhaps more importantly, where have you been these past 13 years? The Sandaime asked as he gripped the arms of his chair, almost shrinking back into his seat to look as tiny and non-threatening as possible. The crimson-haired woman cupped her chin in thought before answering. 13 years, eh? Has it really been that long? To cut a long story short, I was kept prisoner in a medically induced coma. Found myself in some repurposed lab with one of Danzo's cronies trying to rape my mind. And when I commented about the state of Konoha, I was passing by and visiting some of my old haunts and stomping grounds, and took note of the emptiness of the Uchiha district where Mikoto-chan lived. Don't tell me, with myself and Minato gone, Fugaka finally sacked up and tried to pull some half-assed coup? At her questioning, the Sandaime couldn't help but smirk a little. Your abilities of perception are as strong as ever. Yes. Fugaka was planning a coup. If he had succeeded, then the other shinobi villages might have taken advantage of the infighting within Konoha and a fourth ninja war would have started, one which Konoha may not have survived. Itachi Uchiha took the secret mission of stopping the coup, but there were complications. The only survivor was Itachi's younger brother Sasuke. I can only theorize that Danzo had ordered Itachi to murder the entire clan as a whole, instead of simply Fugaku and his conspirators. But I never had any proof to support this theory. Speaking of Danzo, are you certain that his people were keeping you prisoner? The Sandaime asked as he laced his fingers together. Kushina smirked as she knocked off Hiruzen's own picture off the wall, and then tossed the sealing scroll into the Hokage's desk. Pretty sure. That scroll has the severed head of some orange-haired prick. Have Inoichi do that necrophile mind walk shit or whatever to see his memories. Might have some info to finally nail the old bastard. Mikoto was confirmed to be amongst the dead, yes? She asked, earning a grave nod from the Sandaime. Kushina rubbed her temples for a moment, and let out a sad sigh. God damn it, Mikoto, still I guess she could never raise a hand against her own children, even if they're murdering her. A fond smile graced Kushina's lips as she remembered the good times she had with her Uchiha friend. Then the evil Uzumaki's face hardened as she used her rust-covered blade to slice the Hokage desk in two, making Hiruzen yelp and cover his face with his arms since he believed Kushina had intended to kill him, but then he lowered his arms when he realized he was still alive, making a sigh of relief escape his lips. I think it's time for a change in leadership. Sandaime-sama? I'll be taking over as the Hokage. Time for me to right some wrongs and make up for lost time, Kushina stated with a large and almost bestial grin that made the Hokage sweat nervously. Then I'm not sure if you're a suitable candidate, Hiruzen muttered while Kushina then stabbed the tip of her katana straight through the picture of Minato Namikaze, her late husband and the Yondaime Hokage. Her face now a blank mask as she glanced between the now ruined picture and the aged Hokage. Why's that? I only gave up on being Hokage because I was pregnant with Naruto-kun. By now, Naruto-kun is a teenager and I miss so much that I can't ever be his mother, but I can still try to be a part of his life and try to make things right. That aside, I am far superior to Minato. I have more power in just my pinky toe than he did in his entire body. Kushina spoke, completely unafraid to boast of her raw power, and unlike many that bragged about their strength, the evil Uzumaki could easily back up her words. Hiruzen felt himself slowly melting beneath her gaze as he replied nervously that is to say, you certainly aren't lacking in power or skill, but you aren't exactly mentally sound. You are infamously known to behave in a highly destructive and erratic manner. When he finished speaking, he was expecting the crimson-haired Kunoichi to lash out in anger, but instead her lips curled up into a smile, and she began to laugh almost hysterically. She even clutched at her sides as she wheezed for air when her laughter finally began to die down. She then pinched Hiruzen's cheek, making the aged Hokage wince in pain, and spoke in a voice that seemed more appropriate for gently scolding a child. Oh Hiruzen, you make me laugh. You've seemed to have gotten soft in your old age. I am mentally unsound? Seems a bit of a stretch in comparison to a certain pasty-faced pedophile who reduced his own existence to that of a parasite for the sake of a bastardized half-baked form of immortality. After I was kidnapped by Kumo to be used for their bloodline breeding program. Raping program. I promised myself that I'd never be a victim ever again. That I wouldn't lose a second village like I had lost Yuzu. So I trained and trained, even forsaking my own humanity to become akin to a demon. I committed the most horrible and gruesome atrocities to put the fear of Kami into the hearts of Konoha's enemies, and thus the evil Uzumaki was born. I did the hard things, the worst things. The kind of things that would have made anyone else crack under the stress and trauma, so that every single man, woman, and child can sleep peacefully and blissfully unaware of what really happens on the battlefield. For the sake of this Kami-forsaken village, I think it's in your best interest to name me the next Hokage, pronto. Wouldn't want to give me a reason to turn against Konoha, yes? She asked at the end, pinching even harder to the point it seemed like she was going to rip off a chunk of flesh. Hiruzen swallowed hard, knowing that this woman might be the most dangerous kind of ninja since Madara. And it would be a terrible idea to make an enemy of her. It would seem he was now stuck with the choice of accepting the rule of a probable tyrant, or refusing and potentially destroying the village he had worked so hard to protect. Finally, he caved as he replied reluctantly, all right. You shall be the Godame. The mantle of Hokage, the responsibilities of leadership, and the consequences of your rule shall be yours. Nodding in acceptance, the crimson-haired woman released him, making him rub his now sore cheek. If Kushina could maintain some measure of restraint, then her being Hokage wouldn't be the worst thing. Grand. Now comes the most important subject of the day. What of my child? Where is he now? What was his childhood like? Tell me everything, and if you dare lie to me, and I discover the truth from my child, then I'll be very happy to shove this here sword right where the sun doesn't shine. You know why I like to use weapons covered in filth and rust? If wounds caused by rusty objects or weapons are not cleaned and treated properly, then it can lead to serious infection, even death. Most especially if one isn't up to date on their tetanus shots. When's the last time you got yours? Kushina asked, and threatened in a not-so-subtle manner, which caused the Hokage to sweat nervously since he couldn't remember. Word has recently spread that both Anko Mitarashi and Naruto have just begun living together, and are likely romantically involved. Much of Naruto's childhood was a lonely existence, and on occasion a stupid and or drunken civilian would assault or bully him. But Anko took it upon herself to protect him over the years and helped greatly in relieving his loneliness, even going out of her way to make sure she stayed and took missions within the village as much as possible. I do not know how, but somehow Naruto-kun's status as the current Jinchuriki was leaked to the general public, and with the village still in chaos after the Kyuubi attack, I was unable to find the leak before whoever the mole was able to cover their tracks. So I made it a law making it forbidden to discuss Naruto's situation, especially to the younger generation. However, it seems in my efforts to protect him, I likely did more harm than good in the long run of things. Hiruzen explained, rubbing his temples with a tired sigh at his failure. Tried to make the best of a bad situation, eh? Guess even being Hokage, you can't control the hearts and minds of the people. What about Jiraiya? Minato begged me down on his knees to allow the frog Sannin to be my child's godfather. The evil Uzumaki asked with narrowed eyes, already knowing that she wasn't going to like the answer. Jiraiya has had absolutely no contact with Naruto. I doubt the boy even knows he has a godfather. Hiruzen answered bluntly, and then felt his heart race as the atmosphere became dark and oppressive, like the very air itself was pressing down on him and threatening to crush him. A small tch sound came from Kushina, causing the windows to shatter into thousands of pieces. I always knew that pervy little frog couldn't be trusted. I'll be sure to give him some deluxe grade treatment the next time I see him. She vowed angrily and then took a deep breath to relax herself, which finally relieved some of the tense atmosphere within the Hokage's office. Sandaime-sama, I want you to call an emergency council meeting tonight, so that I may be officially announced as the new Godame, and I can begin whipping this decrepit village back into shape. Time to take things in a new direction. Kushina spoke as she looked out over the village through the now broken windows, a small giggle escaping her lips. Certainly. I can get everything together by 8 o'clock. What will you be doing in the meantime? The Sandaime asked as he stood up and reached for the telephone to begin making the needed preparations. I'm going to be visiting my son. There's a lot that I need to explain to him. Anko's still living in the same apartment, right? she asked as she sheathed her blade, the Hokage nodding in response to her question, which made the crimson-haired woman smirk, since that meant it'd be easier to find one of her old apprentices. She then sauntered off towards the door with a spring in her step, but before leaving she turned around and spoke. Don't forget about the head in that scroll I gave you. Inoichi might find some pretty damning evidence in that dipshit's noggin. Might finally give you some ammo to nail Danzo. Hiruzen nodded in understanding and gratitude for the reminder, prompting Kushina to take her leave towards Anko's home. It was finally time to make some amends. Her stomach then growled a bit, making her realize she hadn't eaten anything since first awakening. Might as well get some ramen-fueled courage before seeing her son, especially since for the first time in her existence Kushina felt one true regret. Not being the mother her child deserved or needed. Time for some Ichiraku to eat away some of her sorrows before the talk with her son, later. Training Ground 7. Nice. Very nice. Seems you have the jutsu down pat. If Irika fails you for this one, I swear I'll kill him. Anko spoke in a tone filled with pride as she gave the blonde boy a thumbs up. The whiskered teen was covered in sweat since he had been making clones by the dozens without stopping. A smile formed on his face as he nodded in gratitude. Thanks, Anko-sama. There's no way I can fail the genin exam this time. I can't wait to become your apprentice. The blonde exclaimed as he pumped his fist in the air. Then suddenly his stomach began to growl, making him blush a bit since the moment was now ruined. The purple-haired woman chuckled as she shook her head a bit. Seems like someone needs some lunch. Well, I think you earned some Ichiraku today for your hard work. Just remember, when you strap on the headband, the real work starts. She spoke, trying to sound cool. Though it seemed Naruto currently had stars in his eyes at the mentioning of Ichiraku. Am I interrupting anything? Spoke a masculine voice, making the two pariahs turn and spot the form of the copy ninja Kakashi. The masked man's lone eye fixated on his little orange book. Nah. Not really. We were just finishing up here. Something you need? Anko asked as she crossed her arms, not really in the mood to deal with Kakashi at the moment. Or at any, to be honest. You hear the news? Apparently Sakura Haruno is missing and Kazashi's been accusing you. I saw him leaving the Hokage mansion in a big hurry, looked white as a sheet. He must be really concerned about his daughter. Kakashi spoke in a blank tone of voice, making it difficult to tell how he really felt on the subject. Please. That crooked loan shark doesn't care about anything except himself and his piggy bank. One time I overheard Mabuki rambling at the bar. She was so slobbering drunk that she was wailing about her lack of a sex life and how her so-called husband's been grooming his daughter to be some bimbo gold digger. Anko retorted with a smirk, feeling almost sorry for the trophy wife Mabuki. I'm just gonna go. We'll be seeing you at Ichiraku, Anko-sama. Naruto spoke, before departing since he didn't want to get in the way, and he wanted to get to the ramen stand as quickly as possible to quiet the rumbling of his belly. Sure. Go on ahead. I'll catch up with ya. Tell the Ichirakus to put it on my tab. Anko spoke dismissively, her hand making a small shooing motion as he left the training ground, leaving the two ninjas alone on the field. What do you really want, Kakashi? Anko asked bluntly, her eyes narrowing a bit since Kakashi's arrival seemed kind of convenient, almost like he purposefully arrived once she was finished Naruto's training for the day. Couldn't help but notice something. Word is that you publicly threatened Sakura at the academy, then shortly thereafter she just up and disappeared. Not to mention, with the genin exams around the corner, there's now one less student, so there's an imbalance of teams. Now I'm being asked to apprentice Sasuke Uchiha since Team 7 can't be a full team without Sakura, while you have been repeatedly requesting Naruto to be your apprentice. Kakashi explained as he looked up from his smut-filled book, his lone eye narrowing. And? Naruto-kun needs me to be his teacher. Even if Team 7 was put together, you'll no doubt spend all your time kissing up to Sasuke to even bother training your other two students, and even then, you'll just be wasting their time with teamwork exercises. Anko spoke flatly, then she decided to walk away and join up with Naruto before her mood was soured even further. He needs you, eh? More like you seem to need him. Seems to me that your relationship with him might turn a bit sour due to your obsession. Kakashi spoke in a whisper, only for Anko to turn around and march over to him, snatching the Ika book from his hands before he could even react. The fuck do you know about love? You just waltz around reading this trashy smut instead of looking for a meaningful relationship. Don't you dare judge me when you don't know shit. Anko stated and then started to rip out the pages of the book, making Kakashi freeze up as his lone eye widened to the size of a dinner plate. The snake mistress then threw the book to the ground and stomped on it, grinding it beneath her foot until the spine broke. That was an autograph limited edition, Kakashi muttered almost brokenly as he sank to his knees, his lone eye filled with deep despair. The snake user then grabbed his jonin vest and pulled him towards her, till his face was but inches from her own. And another thing, you don't get to play the concerned guy act. You were Minato's student. You're probably the closest thing to an Uncle Naruto-kun has, and yet you have your head up your own ass, fawning over some little Uchiha brat. If you try to get between me and my Naruto-kun, I will crush that damn Sharingan eyeball you're so proud of. She warned him, and then released him from her grip, allowing him to mourn over his ruined porn. Stuffing her hands inside of her pockets, Anko marched off to meet up with Naruto. And at the same time, she made a mental note to swing by Sakura's prison to feed her. The pinkette wouldn't be of much use if she was dead, assuming she even had a use. Ichiraka Ramen Stand. At long last, Naruto arrived at his destination, his mouth watering at the thought of Ichiraka Ramen, and the smell of it made his stomach growl all the more. As he was about to enter, he noticed that the closed sign was up, making the Kyuubi Jinchuriki tilt his head in confusion. He leaned down a bit and saw a lone woman sitting alone slurping down ramen like she hadn't eaten anything in years, and he could even see the Ichirakas busying themselves with cooking ramen. Wanting to know why the closed sign was up, the blonde called out, "Old man Tochi! I am Nichin. What the hell gives? Why were you closed when there's someone in there?" When he finished yelling, a small yelp came from inside the stand as Ayame Ichiraka came out from the back and then placed her hands on his shoulders to quickly turn him around and push him away from the stand. "Sorry, Naruto-kun. But a very important customer just arrived and specifically told us not to let anyone else inside till she was finished. I'll spot you some free ramen later, okay?" Ayame spoke in a very hurried voice, like she was trying to make the boy leave as quickly as possible. Before the whiskered teen could even protest, a female voice called out from inside the stand, "Let him in. He can join me." At her order, Ayame let go of Naruto and quickly ushered him inside, making the blonde wonder why the ramen waitress was acting so nervous and jittery. When he entered the stand, he saw what could only be described as one of the most beautiful women he had ever seen, especially with her vibrant crimson hair. On a scale of 1 to 10, she'd definitely be a 12. There was even a pleasant aroma about her consisting of foxes and ramen. "Sit down, Naruto-kun." The mystery woman spoke, gesturing to a stool next to her, prompting the blonde to accept the invitation as he sat right beside her. His eyes widened a bit when he saw all the empty ramen bowls pushed to the side, showing that she had a love for Ichiraka that rivaled his own. "How'd you know my name? And how did you even know I was just outside?" he asked, feeling like he knew this woman from somewhere. A feeling of familiarity overcoming him as he couldn't help but take in her luscious form, a small blush forming on his cheeks. "Sense your chakra. It shine like a beacon, due in no small part to your burden. Makes you stand out. And I think I know the name of my child," she responded as she slurped up some ramen, her face nothing more than a calm facade. Though on the inside, within her mind, a chibi Kushina was panicking as sirens blared and red strobe lights flashed. "Your child? Just who the hell are you?" Naruto asked, almost dreading the answer as his mind ground to a halt. He wanted to deny it, he really did, but he needed to hear it from her own mouth. "Tochi? I am? Why don't you take a break for a bit?" the crimson-haired woman asked, prompting the father and daughter pair to nod and slip into the back to give the two some privacy. The stranger's violet eyes then met Naruto's sapphire blue orbs, her eyes filled with sadness and longing as she continued to speak. "There's no easy way to say this, so I shall just have to say it. My name is Kushina Uzumaki, and I am your mother. I gave birth to you on October 10th, and I was the Kyuubi container before you." After her introduction, the blonde felt a pit in his stomach and his mouth and throat seemed to dry up. Something in him snapped as he wrapped his hands around her neck and screamed, "Where were you? Where were you all these years? Why did you come back now?" he demanded, numerous emotions flooding him. Anger, pain, sadness, frustration and confusion. Normally, if someone put their hands around Kushina's throat, she would have curb-stomped them, but this was her child. She grabbed his wrists, and then gently pulled his hands away as she replied, "I know you're angry. You must have been so alone. I can't even imagine how much you must have craved for the love and affection of a parent. And now that I've dropped in out of nowhere, you aren't sure what to feel except for rage. To answer your question, I was being held prisoner in a drug-induced coma. I only recently came to, and made an immediate beeline for Konoha." When she finished her explanation, the whiskered teen stared heatedly into her eyes, scanning for any signs of lying, but all he could find was a deep well of sorrow and regret, but at the same time deep and unconditional love. "You're really my mom? And you were held prisoner?" he asked almost hesitantly. "Need more proof I'm your mother? Come on. I have a witness that may answer some of your questions." "Now close your eyes for a moment," she replied as closed her eyes, prompting the blonde to do the same, and when he reopened them he found that the surroundings had changed from Ichiraka's humble ramen stand to that of a sewer. The air felt oppressive, full of anger and hatred. But there was another emotion, desire maybe. "What is this place?" he asked as he stared down the darkened hallway and then realized his hand was loosely entwined in the hand of Kushina as she gently guided him towards some unforeseen destination. "This is your mindscape. A space in the subconscious mind of a Jinchuriki where the bijou reside. Have you ever met the Kyuubi before?" she asked at the end out of curiosity, though she felt like she already knew the answer since he didn't even know her name. "I tried a few times to talk to the Kyuubi when I put 2 and 2 together about my status as its container. But I could never get in contact." "Wait. You said earlier that you were the previous container," he replied and quickly put it together that the tailed beast would be able to provide testimony to support Kushina's tale. "Yup. I'm going to introduce you," Kushina answered as they neared a gate-like structure with the tag labeled seal on it. Inside was the form of the Kyuubi no Kitsune in all its glory, its head resting on its front legs as it seemed to be asleep until a deep and rumbling voice spoke. "I thought I caught your scent once more, Kushina-san. I should have known a simple flesh wound like that couldn't have killed you. The voice of the tailed beast then let out a deep chortling sound, obviously laced with a dark sense of humor. I wouldn't call being pierced through the stomach by one of your claws a flesh wound, seeing as how my body was severely weakened by the birthing process, and with you being ripped out of me and my regenerative abilities were pretty much shot at that time. Kurama, may I introduce your current container, my child, Naruto Uzumaki? The crimson-haired woman spoke and then gestured to the blonde boy who nervously waved, already seeing that the two had some kind of friendly relationship. I see. Welcome, Kit. I am Kurama. You have my blessing to grovel at my feet and worship me. The beast spoke, its deep voice making it difficult to tell if it was joking or not, though it was obvious the beast had a high opinion of itself. Kurama? We've talked about this. Your voice tends to throw people off in your bestial form. Kushina spoke with a sigh, gesturing at the beast's large-sized body to emphasize her point, making a small sweat drop form on the fox as it sighed in some annoyance. Very well then. But I shall freely admit, your soft and squishy human forms fail to capture my true glory, and they are far too cramped for my liking. The fox grumbled as it was then engulfed in a bright flash of light. When the human's eyes cleared, Naruto gawked when he spotted a woman with gold and crimson hair, giving it a flame-like appearance. Her skin was a dark caramel color with the same whisker marks on her own cheeks with two fangs jutting from her upper lip, and her body was that of a perfect hourglass frame and a bust that could put a certain busta Sandine to shame, and there were 9 swishing rust-orange foxtails behind her. For clothes she wore a simple black kimono with a crimson sash and she wore no footwear. Overall, Kurama's human form could best be described as exotic, bestial, mature, and dignified. The air around her consisting of grace and poise, like a noble, or a priestess. She blinked her dark crimson eyes a few times, and then spoke. I despise this utterly hideous form. How do you humans stand to walk on 2 legs? This is completely undignified, though Naruto-san seems to approve of it. He must have severely low standards. The Kyuubi no Kitsune spoke, pointing out the fact that the blonde was visibly ogling her form. In spite of your opinions, Kurama, many would find your human form to be very attractive. And it seems my son is no exception. But enough about that. I came here for 2 important reasons. Kurama? Would you please support and cooperate with Naruto-kun as you did with me? And would you please help show yours and my memories of that fateful night? Kushina asked with a warm smile, though Kurama knew all too well that one doesn't say no to Kushina. Ever. Very well. But as usual my services won't be for free. Now both of you grab a hold of one of my tails. Fair warning to you, Naruto-san, this will not be a pleasant experience for you. Kurama warned the blonde as 2 of her foxtails extended towards both him and Kushina through the bars of the kitsune's prison. With a slow nod he grabbed onto the tip of the tail, and then felt his whole body freeze up as he witnessed the events of his own birth. The masked man taking him hostage and kidnapping Kushina. The forced release of Kurama and being put into a destructive trance that caused many deaths within Konoha. He saw his mother comforting him with a small toy, even as she barely clung to life. And then he witnessed his parents' final moments. Tears filled his eyes when his mother tried to offer words of comfort, wisdom and encouragement to him. But he also felt anger that his own father, the Yondaime, forced the burden of being a Jinchuriki onto him. Though to be somewhat fair, they didn't have very many options as time was running out, and they were both running on fumes at that point. And finally, from his own eyes he saw the forms of Umbu in blank masks carrying the body of his dead mother away. By now, it was obvious that Kushina spoke the truth. I see, so that's what really happened. At first, I wanted to be angry at you, to blame you for not being around to raise me, but I can't anymore. It wasn't your fault you were taken. I can't hold you at fault when you didn't do anything wrong. I just wish you could have woken up a lot sooner. Naruto spoke as he rubbed away some tears in his eyes, with Kurama watching on stoically while Kushina had a downcast look on her face. The Uzumaki woman then pulled her child into a warm embrace and replied, "Me too. I would give anything to be able to turn back the clock and change the events of that night, but even that is beyond my power. I was never able to be your mother. At least not for the long term, but may I still be a part of your life? We can still be friends, and I promise to support you unconditionally, doing everything I can to make amends." At her words, he returned the hug, wrapping his arms around her as he answered, "I'd like that. At least now I know you never abandoned me. You were taken. The people who took you, the guy in the mask, they're the ones to blame for everything that went wrong with my life." Naruto spoke at the end with some anger in his voice. "I already know who kidnapped me, and I shall be taking care of him soon enough." But still the masked man is somewhat of a mystery. Only one Uchiha in history has been able to control Kurama. Kurama? Was that guy in the mask really Madara Uchiha? The evil Uzumaki asked with a raised eyebrow, since that question had been bugging her for some time now. Doubtful. His Sharingan was pretty strong, but his chakra lacked the same intensity as Madara. Not to mention the man in the mask smelled differently. He smelled wrong, corrupted. Like rot. His scent both invoked some familiarity, and much anger. But no, I sincerely doubt that was actually Madara himself, Kurama replied as she slowly blinked her eyes, a frown on her face suggesting that the very mentioning of Uchihos, especially Madara, put a bad taste in the kitsune's mouth. I see. An imposter then. Naruto-kun, why don't you stay here and bond with Kurama? We can talk more later, and I have lots of things to take care of. Kushina spoke and patted her son on the head as she gently broke their embrace together. Right. You mentioned that you know who took you. And bond with her? Naruto asked at the end, glancing over to the kitsune who seemed to be staring down at him like he were a roach. Yes. Bond. Take it from me, it is far better to cooperate with your tenant than treat her with disdain. Kurama's not a bad person, but certain life experiences and dealings with humankind has left her bitter and jaded. So do try and get along. With that said, Kushina vanished in a flash of light, leaving her son alone with the Bija. Allow me to make this clear, if you wish for my cooperation and services, you must provide some accommodations. The kitsune spoke bluntly as she lowered herself to the floor and gracefully sat on her knees. The whiskered teen turned towards her and rubbed his head a bit in confusion. What kind? You're kinda stuck in my mindscape, so there's not that much I can do, he replied, making the Bijou shake her head in annoyance. Very well. For a start, I demand a more visually pleasing home. This sewer setting is exceptionally depressing, she responded, gesturing out towards the darkened halls where the sounds of water dripping could be heard. Oh. Right. I see your point. How about this? If this is my mind, I can set the rules, right? What if I gave you permission to make whatever changes you want in here? The blonde asked, hoping his offer might help get in the kitsune's good graces. However, her face was rather difficult to read since it seemed to show very little emotion, but then a small smile graced her lips as she replied, I accept your generous offer. At least this way, I can change and decorate according to my own tastes. I may soon grow to tolerate your presence more. And if you continue to please me, I would happily accept you as my slave. At that last statement, the blonde couldn't help but sweat drop a little bit. Not entirely sure if being enslaved to the QB would actually be a good thing. Now then, let's see about changing this dreary sewer. Kurama spoke as she clapped her hands, and then the scenery changed to nothing but a white void to erase everything in sight, and to provide her with a blank canvas to play around with. Real world. Ichirakas. Kushina's eyes fluttered open as she awoke in the real world again, with the Ichirakas themselves standing behind the counter, as they had patiently waited for her awakening. The crimson-haired woman smiled and spoke, thank you for your time and patience. I shall be leaving you so you may continue your business as normal. I'll come by later to settle my bill. At her words, the father and daughter pair nodded in appreciation as Kushina scooped up the seemingly asleep form of her son and carried him outside, only to be met by the waiting form of Anko Mitarashi. Yo. I knew you were back. Ichirakas wouldn't let me in, so I decided to wait. Were you doing that Bijou meditation thing with Naruto-kun? The purple-haired woman asked with a cheeky grin. I did. Sorry if I kept you waiting. The evil Uzumaki apologized and gave a sheepish smile, rubbing the back of her head. The snake user then gently retrieved Naruto from his mother's grip, held him close in her arms. Ah. Don't worry about it. How'd it go with Naruto-kun? The snake mistress asked as she comfortingly rubbed the boy's back, planting a soft kiss on his cheek. He was angry at first. But once I showed him the memories pertaining to that night, he came to an understanding. The quick version is that a Sharingan user in a mask sabotaged the resealing process after Naruto-kun's birth. Then once Kyubi-san was sealed into my son, I was kidnapped and held prisoner in a coma. The evil Uzumaki answered, summarizing the reason she vanished to her former pupil. That explains a lot actually, since your body was never found. Anko remarked with a frown. She then sighed and asked her mentor, so what now? You coming back with me to my place? The crimson-haired woman looked towards the Hokage tower and replied no. It won't be very long until word spreads about my return. I need to tie up some loose ends before they slip away. Anko-chan? There anything I should know since I have only recently returned? Anko thought for a moment as she cupped her chin and then answered yeah. Not sure if you'll consider this important, but I kidnapped Kazashi's kid, Sakura. At her statement, the former Jinchuriki's face fell into a blank state, like she were asking, are you serious? And why in Kami's green earth would you bother kidnap Kazashi's ill-bred offspring? Kushina asked, feeling that was a waste of time and effort. Hey! I had a good reason. In the academy, that Sakura bitch is the top kunoichi. I knew she'd be put on Team 7 along with that Sasuke brat and with Naruto-kun. And with Kakashi being a Sharingan user, he'd be a shoo-in for Team 7 sensei. So I removed Sakura from the equation, and with her gone, Team 7 would be incomplete, and I could freely take Naruto-kun as an apprentice without fear of losing him to some incompetent and lazy-ass teacher. Not to mention Sakura was known to have been abusive to poor Naruto-kun during his time at the academy, Anko explained, prompting her teacher to nod in understanding. I see. After Kakashi's failings during the war, and his lack of growth as a person and a ninja, I wouldn't trust him with my son either. Come to think of it, your kidnapping of the girl might help me get one over on Kazashi and humiliate him. Take Naruto-kun home, I have a council meeting to attend. By the way, is this Sakura girl attractive? Kushina asked at the end out of curiosity. The dango lover rolled her eyes a bit, and replied, she's not exactly hideous, but she's not a head-turner either. She's really lacking in body proportions, likely due to dieting and lack of kunoichi training. She's being held at the usual place at this. The crimson-haired woman adopted a thinking pose and then nodded as if she had reached a decision. She then departed towards the Hokage Tower, leaving Anko to take the blonde boy to her apartment. He would need his rest before the genin exams tomorrow. And with Kushina herself back in Konoha, there was absolutely no way she would accept the teacher's bias towards the Whisker Teen. Konoha Council Chambers. Hiruzen sat down quietly as the members of the various councils gathered, whispering amongst themselves as to why this meeting was called, and so far, only Inoichi was privy to the details since he scanned the head of Yamanaka, who was confirmed to be a direct subordinate of Danzo. The War Hawk being guilty of conspiracy, clan genocide, kidnapping, illegal experimentation, and a number of other charges that rivaled if not surpassed Orochimaru's listed crimes. And Kizashi was obviously aware of Kushina's return but seemed to have kept quiet on the subject, likely out of self-preservation. The Sandaime was sure to keep a very close eye on his old rival, and even had a number of umbu hidden throughout the chambers if things got out of hand. Sensing the presence of one of his umbu approaching, he turned slightly, and saw Nico leaning over to whisper into his ear, "She has arrived," prompting the aged Hokage to nod as he banged his gavel, calling for the attention of the councils. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. I called this emergence meeting for two very important reasons. Firstly, I am pleased to announce that I am now stepping down as Hokage, and I shall be shortly introducing to you the new Godame," Hiruzen announced, earning a series of claps from the councils, excluding Danzo and Kizashi, the latter of which seemed to be paling until he was as white as a sheet, already guessing who the Godame would be, and the pink-haired man's torment brought a feeling of satisfaction to the Sandaime. The second reason is that due to newfound evidence we can now expose a traitor in our midst. "Danzo Shimura, I name you as the traitor," Hiruzen announced, pointing an accusatory finger at the form of the War Hawk, causing all eyes to turn that gaze at the so-called cripple. "Me, Hiruzen? What evidence could you possibly possess?" The founder of Root asked with a smug expression, though he knew that he wouldn't have been so openly accused if Hiruzen didn't have something solid. With a snap of the Hokage's fingers, Inoichi reached under the table for a moment, and then placed a large container on the table for all to see, the floating head of Yamanaka visible through the glass window. "There's my evidence. Inoichi has already gone through your subordinates' memories. We know everything now. The orphanages you own to continue a fresh supply of recruits, the experiments on your mutated arm and the implanted Sharingan eye, your involvement in destroying the entire Uchiha clan instead of the guilty few, your dealings with Orochimaru. All of it. You're finished, Danzo, and by the power vested in me as the Sandaime, I hereby pass the means of execution to the new Godame," Hiruzen announced coldly, his face hardening into a steely mask which lacked any emotion. Before Danzo could even open his mouth, a rust-covered blade pierced through his stomach, and in one swift motion, his bandaged and mutated arm was ripped clean out of its socket and tossed onto the table. From behind Danzo's seat emerged the form of Kushina Uzumaki, who was grinning widely at her entrance, and at finally being able to gut the War Hawk. "Evening, Mr. Gloomy Gus. Did you miss me?" "My sword certainly didn't." "You?" Danzo choked out as blood began to spill from his mouth. "Yup. Me," was Kushina's curt response as she grabbed the old man by the throat and chucked him onto the table, making a loud thudding noise as she sidled up next to the War Hawk's form and pulled out a kunai with a flick of her wrist. "If I remember correctly, I promised that if you ever interfered with me or my family, that I'd rip your guts out." "Well, time to pay the piper, old man." With her intent made clear, Kushina plunged the kunai into the wound left behind by her sword, and then dragged the kunai downward to cut open Danzo's belly. The crimson-haired woman then grabbed at the ribcage and pulled it apart with one strong tug, making a loud snapping noise. Contrary to what a lot of people may think, the human body has a lot more guts than you'd think. So it can take a while to pull it all out. Kushina spoke in a casual manner, and then started to dig her hands around in her current victim's belly, and started to pull out the intestines and toss them in the space between the Root leader's legs. The scene made numerous members of the civilian council turn green in the face before puking all over themselves or more mercifully passing out and fainting. Think of it like pulling out a long, wet and very squishy garden hose of some kind. The evil Uzumaki spoke as she continued yanking out the intestines, her hands, face, and clothes soaked in blood. All the while, Danzo writhed in pain as he was drowned in his own blood. With his mutated arm gone, there was only one means of escape. He'd have to use Shursui's implanted eye in his concealed eye socket to use his Anaji and escape. While he didn't want to lose the power of Shursui's eye, he didn't have any choice in the matter. He tried to focus chakra into the implanted eye, but then Kushina crushed it beneath her thumb. "Oi! Let's not have any of that overpowered Sharingan shit. You forget, I'm an expert in chakra sensory. I sensed that implanted eye from the jump. Felt familiar too. Did that one in your eye socket belong to that Shursui kid? Ah well, won't be doing you much good anymore. Now where was I? Oh yeah? Time to put you out of everyone's misery." The evil Uzumaki muttered as she grabbed some of Danzo's intestines and then looped it around his neck and tugged, now garroting him with his own guts. The aged Warhawk reached out, his lone eye pleading for help, until his hand fell down and gurgling noises escaped his lips, having finally died, and being freed from his gruesome end. With a content sigh, the blood-stained Kunoichi released the corpse of Danzo and smirked. With that done, she clapped her hands and began to speak. Enjoy the show, ladies, gents and vermin? Now then, time to move things along. As your new Godame, I hereby announce that the civilian and elder councils are permanently disbanded, earning a series of gasps from the groups who were going to be rendered defunct. You can't do that! Kizashi shouted in outrage, temporarily forgetting his fears now that his power and position were threatened. Oh no? Try and stop me then. Kushina retorted with a grin as she brandished her rusty katana, making a come-here motion with her finger, almost daring anyone to try. When no one stepped up, the evil Uzumaki continued to speak. I am aware that this village has been unkind to my son, whom you all must know as Naruto Uzumaki. So if anyone continues to mistreat him, I'll see to it that punishment is duly handed out. And Kizashi? I was recently made aware that your daughter was very cruel to my son. As reparation, I'll be taking her as a slave for the Uzumaki family. What? My child. So you did have something to do with her kidnapping? I won't allow, the pink-haired man shouted, only to be cut off when Kushina placed the tip of her sword to his throat. Won't allow what? How about this then? I'll see to it that your daughter is released, free from harm. But in exchange, you must die by my hand. A life for a life. I think that's a fair enough trade. Kushina spoke in a sickly sweet tone, prompting the now former civilian council head to dryly swallow. Take her then, just take her. She couldn't even attract that damned Uchiha brat's attention anyway. Kizashi replied, making the shinobi council and Sandaime glare heatedly at him for so easily tossing aside his daughter. A low chuckle came from the evil Uzumaki as she slowly shook her head and spoke in an unimpressed and disappointed voice. So quick to abandon your daughter to save your own skin. Makes me wonder what Mabuki-chan ever saw in you. At her statement, the pink-haired man's face turned a dark shade of red in rage as his form shook violently at being made a fool of in public like this. You just wait, without the civilian council, you'll be so buried in paperwork that you'll quit before the week is out. Kizashi spoke, trying to get the last word in to try and save face, but the violet-eyed Kunoichi didn't seem all that concerned. I'm not that worried. I'm infamously tenacious, and I know a few tricks in speedily processing paperwork, she retorted in a dismissive voice, and then gave a victory sign as she marched out of the chambers. Just as she reached the doorway, she turned on her heel and continued to speak. Oh right. I almost forgot something. I now hereby announce that the Uzumakis shall be an officially registered clan of Konoha. Council meeting adjourned, she shouted, and then exited the chambers with the doors shutting behind her. With the evil Uzumaki gone, one of Hiruzen's old teammates, Koharu, spoke up. Hiruzen, you have to do something. With that woman in charge of things, she'll ruin Konoha inside of a year or less. Sighing, the Sandaime pulled out his pipe and lit it as he replied, I'm retired and no longer the Hokage. It's out of my hands. I am finished playing mediator between a bunch of whiny civilians that only care for money, and the loyal shinobi who work to protect this village. If Kushina-sama says that the civilian and elder councils are disbanded, then they are disbanded. Her word is now law. With his piece spoken, Hiruzen puffed on his pipe and left the chambers as well, with the clan heads following close behind him with some satisfied looks on their faces. The power balance of Konoha's government now lied exclusively in the hands of the shinobi. With the evil Uzumaki now returned, Konoha would not have to fear for another long-term war. In Kumo, Kushina was infamously known for castrating rapists, making Sandaime Reikage loyalists forever live in fear of her name. In IWA, she was known as a bogeyman of sorts, a creature that supposedly devoured disobedient genin. In Kiri, in the Land of Iron, it is every sword user's greatest dream and worst fear to cross swords with the evil Uzumaki. And in Suna, Kushina's wrath was known to be as scorching and unforgiving as the desert sun. With the new Godame Hokage in place, it would not be long until word spread around the elemental nations, and the leaders of those nations would come, begging for peace and mercy from the most dangerous kunoichi to ever live. And if they did not satisfy her, then they would be doomed to fall beneath her sword. And Chapter 2. Bonus scene, Sakura's fate. Help! Please! I want to go home. I want my mommy! Screamed the sobbing form of Sakura Haruno as she was currently hanging upside down, her face red from the blood flowing down to her head, making her feel woozy. She tried struggling and kicking her bound legs, but only succeeded in making the chains keeping her suspended rattle and clank together. She heard a door open, making her gulp in fear, believing that the crazy snake lady was coming, but instead it was a woman with crimson hair carrying a rusty katana. Hey there, sunshine. The woman greeted, making Sakura sigh in relief at the prospect of being rescued. Thank Kami you're here. You have to get me out of here. That damned anko woman kidnapped me. Sakura shouted and made her chains rattle again for emphasis, earning a chuckle from the stranger who shook her head, confusing the pinkette. I don't have to do anything. Name's Kushina, Kushina Uzumaki. I'm your new owner. The violet-eyed woman introduced herself with a sinister giggle, making the fangirl's blood run as cold as ice water. Owner? What do you mean owner? Sakura asked, in confusion. Instead of immediately answering, the crimson-haired kunoichi pushed a nearby button, making the pinkette drop to the floor with a loud thud. The girl glared at her for a moment, but it melted away into a look of fear as the stranger approached a toolbox sitting atop a stool. I held your daddy at sword point, and gave him to choice to sacrifice himself and set you free, or to save his own hide and let me keep you as a slave for my family. He chose to throw you right under the bus. Kushina answered as she pulled a small device from the box, the fangirl's heart sinking down in her chest at the news, though for some reason, it didn't actually surprise her. What are you going to do to me? The pinkette squeaked out in fear, wondering what this woman had planned for her. The crimson-haired woman turned around, revealing the object in her hand to be a bottle cap opener as she approached. Well, before I put the slave seal on you, I was thinking of giving you a hands-on demonstration of what happens to people who hurt my son. Kushina responded with a humorless laugh, clearly about to take some measure of joy in what comes next. Your son? Naruto? Naruto's your kid? Then where the hell have you been? Sakura demanded, futilely trying to crawl towards the door only to find a hand on her ankle, pulling her towards her soon-to-be master. In a coma, unfortunately. Now how about we start with bending some things in ways they aren't meant to bend? And then we work from there? I think you might have more value as a slave than as a kunoichi. Kushina coldly responded and grabbed one of Sakura's fingers, placing it into the bottle cap opener, and then tugging upward, making a loud snap noise followed by the screams of the pinkette. Kushina knew that it may take a while to properly train this girl, but with such a low tolerance for pain, she'll easily learn her place. End scene. Chapter 3, Setting the Stage. Change is coming. Within his own mindscape, Naruto couldn't help but admire the work that Kurama had done with the place. Gone was the dark and depressing sewer, and was replaced by a field filled with flowers of all shapes and sizes, and trees to help give shade as the sun shined overhead. And in place of a gate, there was now a small compound resembling a shrine with the word seal above the gate, providing the kitsune a more comfortable living space. Wow! Love what you've done with the place. It seems peaceful and relaxing, Naruto commented as he scratched the back of his head, while the kitsune was sitting on her knees and sipping at a cup of tea. A thin and almost unseen smile gracing her lips. Naturally. What were you expecting of me? Fire and brimstone? Kurama asked with a fake glare, as though she were pretending to be offended. She then sighed and continued to speak. It's not the real thing, but it's close to my dream home. No pun intended. Your dream home? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow, wondering what the kitsune's wish was. Truth be told, all he had ever heard about the fox was that the Kyubi no Kitsune was a creature of destruction and hatred incarnate. But now he knew there was way more to her, and he had to ask himself, what would a bijou want for his or herself? Yes. Someplace in the mountains, with flowers and trees. Someplace where I can feel the warm summer breeze flow past my fur. A place where I can lounge beneath the sun. Somewhere far, far away from humans, most especially Senjus and Uchihos. Kurama replied with voice filled with longing before taking another sip of tea. Senjus and Uchihos, huh? Not many of those guys left anymore. I can understand why you hate the Uchihas. I heard stories that Madara Uchiha could use his Sharingan to put you in a trance, like the masked guy from the night I was born. But what's your deal with the Senjus? Naruto asked with a somewhat confused look as he sat across from the kitsune's currently human form with his legs crossed. For me to explain, allow me to share unto you a chapter of a darker age of the shinobi era. The kind of which that isn't taught in your academy. Have you ever heard of an era of time called the Bloody Clan Wars? The kitsune asked her current container, who could only shake his head no in response. Today, in this day and age, your Shodaime Hokage, Hashirama Senju, is painted as a revolutionary, or a hero. But I am perhaps one of the few entities who know the facts. The real facts of what actually happened. This was during a period of time when the shinobi nations hadn't yet been founded. The shinobi clans were naught but mercenaries that hired themselves out to the highest bidder. The Senjus and Uchihas were the most prominent of these clans, so much so that if one side hired the Senjus, then the opposition would hire the Uchihas, and vice versa. The fighting became so terrible amidst the clans, that there was an unspoken rule that no one should reveal their surname, for fear of accidentally revealing it to a member of a rivaling clan. Worse, the life expectancy was very short, usually ages 5 to 30. And even worse, children were forced into becoming ninja against their will, forced into being child soldiers. Even Hashirama's youngest brother was killed amidst the fighting. Finally, one day, when Hashirama reached full adulthood, he managed to broker a peace between the Senjus and Uchihas, and then both he and Madara founded Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves. Other nations followed this example and began creating their own shinobi nations. Hashirama desired for Madara to be the Shodaime, but seeing as how the village was a democracy, the people favored Hashirama instead, so he became the Shodaime Hokage against his wishes. Skip ahead some time later, and I was sealed inside of the Shodaime's wife, Mito Uzumaki, who had also sealed my siblings into other humans, becoming the first generation of Jinchuriki. A Kage summit was then called, and Hashirama had decided on creating a balance of power to form a sense of equality and security for the other villages, and the Senju was quick to hand off my siblings and their containers as if they were free candy to the other villages. The kitsune explained and then stopped when she noticed that the blonde seemed ready to explode from this information. Suddenly, the blonde began to ask, whoa. Back up, the Shodaime wanted Madara to be Hokage instead? And he just gave away the Jinchuriki to other just like that, when he had them at his fingertips. You said his wife was your Jinchuriki at that time, And Hashirama faced you in combat when Madara summoned you and put you in a Sharingan-induced trance, so he should have known firsthand at the destructive capabilities of the Jinchuriki. Did the Jinchuriki themselves even get a say on if they wanted to stay in Konoha or not? When he finally stopped bombarding her with questions, the Kitsune simply answered, "You're finally beginning to understand. The untold facts are that Madara and Hashirama were once friends in boyhood, and in his efforts for peace, Hashirama in his misguidance and stupidity only worsened the state of the world and became one of the worst villains in history, but was painted as a great hero by the masses. Allow me to explain unto you, that so long as someone wants something that someone else has, they shall always go to war over it. Be it money, land, prestige, or even us Jinchuriki and Bija. Humankind will always find an excuse to fight with one another. Back in the bloody clan wars, the shinobi clans were told by their clients to loot, to rape, and to murder, and all for what? Coin? A sense of a job well done? Your whole shinobi system is nothing short of a sick and demented joke. And these same atrocities are still happening today, and little has changed. Hashirama never managed to establish a lasting peace, he just made the fighting more organized with the founding of villages and nations. I told these facts to your mother, and she understood all that I had said. Have you drawn the same conclusion as she once did? She asked him, finally finishing her history lesson as she waited for the boy's response. I don't know what was my mother's conclusion, he asked the Kitsune, causing Kurama to gaze up towards the blue sky she had created within the mindscape, as though she were thinking back on that moment of time. After a few moments, the flame-haired Kitsune responded in a flat tone of voice, your mother's conclusion was complete and total control. She believed that within the elemental nations, only the strongest can change the course of things. Hashirama, at the time, was the strongest, but he was a poor leader. If he had been a bit wiser, then he would have kept my siblings and established an empire, stamping out anyone who would disturb the peace. The other Kages would have been left in charge of their own villages, but would all ultimately answer to the Hokage. That was Kushina's conclusion. So then tyranny? Despotism? And how do you know all this stuff? And you hate the Sun just because of what the Shodaime did to your siblings? The blonde asked as he crossed his arms, his eyes closing as though he were deep in thought about everything he had been told. Kushina believes that in order to do good, you must also be willing to do evil. You cannot expect to make any progress towards your goal if you tiptoe around any issues or try to make nice with everyone around you. And you are correct, we Bija preferred to live and let live, out of sight from humankind, but your Shodaime refused to allow us to live in peace and forced us into becoming weapons and prizes for other villages. Is it wrong to wish to live beneath the sky? To feel the wind, the rain and the sun? Is it wrong to wish to be left alone? And how do I know? You'd be amazed what one can learn when sealed inside the Shodaime's wife. The Nine Tails answered in a bitter tone, her crimson eyes now gaining an intimidating glow about them. Wow, so that's what you Bija have always wanted, was to be left alone. I had always heard that tailed beasts were nothing but monsters that should be kept locked away, Naruto admitted somberly as he scratched at his cheek, a slightly ashamed look on his face. A false narrative. It is much easier to collar and chain something when it is viewed as a dumb and mindless beast instead of an intelligent creature that can think and reason for itself. But enough talk, it is time for you to awaken. You have an academy test to prepare for, yes? Think on all that which I have told you, and I may just grace you with my divine presence once more, the Kyuubi stated, and then with a snap of her fingers caused the blonde to vanish in a flash of light as she expelled him from the mindscape. Real world. Naruto's eyes snapped open and he found himself in Anko's bed, still fully dressed as he looked at the clock and realized that if he didn't leave quickly, then he'd be late for the genin exam. Shaking off his sleepiness, he then leapt out of the bed and into the living room area, finding Anko herself sitting at the dining table with a newspaper, a mug of coffee and a fully prepared bento with his name attached to it with a sticky note. Hey there. Made you a bento. Be sure to knock Irika for a loop. The snake mistress spoke with a loving smile, prompting the whiskered teen to put a short but sweet kiss on her lips and then hug her nude frame before grabbing the bento and rushing out the door only for his face to press into something soft and squishy before he pulled back and found the form of his birth mother preparing to knock on the door. She appeared to be caught off guard for a split second, but then she smiled and spoke. Hey there, kiddo. Where's the fire? She asked him with a slightly teasing grin. She then looked past him and spotted Anko, who was currently sitting nude and now seemed akin to a deer caught in the headlights as she stared back at the crimson-haired woman. Why is Anko-chan naked? Anko? You already putting the moves on my child? You should at least wait till he's a chunin, Kushina called out in a teasing tone. The snake user awkwardly waved at her former teacher and replied, nah. I haven't done anything inappropriate with him. We have a no clothes inside the home type rule. Huh. That actually sounds kinda sexy. Anyways, what luck that you actually ran into me, Naruto-kun. I was actually hoping to catch you so we could walk together to the academy. Since I'm now the Godaime Hokage, I thought it best that I see what needs fixing around the village, starting with where the next generation of ninjas begin to learn. Kushina explained as she turned her attention to the blonde, though he couldn't help but sweat drop at how casually she handled Anko's explanation for her nudity. Then it struck him when the blonde realized that now he was related to not one, but two Hokages now. Trying to contain his awe, the blonde boy cleared his throat and asked, that's awesome. I wouldn't mind walking with you a bit, and yeah, that's not a bad idea to try and make the academy better. But what about the guy that kidnapped you and what's with the doggy kennel? Naruto asked at the end, pointing to a large kennel that Kushina was carrying in her hand, the sounds of crying and whimpering coming from it. Don't worry about my kidnapper, he's already worm food. And this? Well, your old classmate and school bully Sakura's in there. Take a look, the crimson-haired woman offered as she held the cage a bit higher, prompting the blonde to look through the door and see that it was indeed the pinkette herself curled into a ball as she seemed to be nursing a pair of broken fingers. Wasn't she kidnapped? And why do you have her locked in a doggy cage? The blonde asked with a raised eyebrow, feeling slightly sorry for the pink-haired girl, though seeing her like this also gave him a twinge of satisfaction given her abusive treatment of him back in the academy. Actually, she ran away from home. It would seem that Kizashi doesn't treat his family very well, and as for the cage, I didn't want her running off or vanishing before she can testify against her old man, Kushina replied, speaking more than loud enough for Anko to hear, making the snake mistress realize that Kushina had already made up some kind of cover story to explain Sakura's disappearance. Gotta hand it to her for thinking on her feet despite only just recently returning to Konoha. The blonde glanced between his birth mother and the doggy cage with some suspicion, but chose not to question it, largely since he felt no obligation to aid Sakura due to her frequent mistreatment of him back at the academy, and for her bad-mouthing Anko earlier. Could he have stood up to her himself? Very easily, but then she'd throw a tantrum and tattle on her daddy, and then the bastard Kizashi would have made things harder for the blonde boy in the long run. Hence why he never directly fought back against Sakura. Naruto, help me! Help me! Sakura whispered, the fingertips of her uninjured hand poking through the door, prompting Kushina to kick the underside of the kennel and speak, "Shut up or I'll drown you, Hirano." The threat quickly silenced the pinkette as she retreated back into her curled ball state and let out a shrill whimper. Shall we go then? Time's wasting. The crimson-haired woman asked, earning a small nod from her son. After waving goodbye to Anko, the two Uzumakis proceeded to walk towards the academy, all the while ignoring the occasional whimper from the doggy kennel. The whiskered teen had his hands clasped behind his head as he spoke barely back in Konoha, "And you're already the Godame Hokage. You don't waste any time, do you?" His mother chuckled as she replied back, "Well, what can I say? People find it very difficult to say no to me. And the sooner I can set up shop, the better. I still need to do an official introductory speech and all that good stuff, but that can wait until I've gotten a better picture as how the village is currently running." The academy seemed like a good place to start. The blonde nodded in understanding since she had been trapped in a coma for so long that she would need to see how things worked firsthand, since some things were probably a bit different than how she originally remembered them. Wait a sec, if you're the Hokage now, shouldn't you be cooped up in the Hokage's office dealing with paperwork all the livelong day? The blonde asked out of curiosity. Wheelio Kushina spoke as she scratched her cheek with a single finger, a bright and triumphant-looking smile on her face as she thought back on her solution to the paperwork issue. Flashback, earlier that morning. Okay, that should be enough. Kushina muttered with a small sigh as she stared at multiple bags filled with blood. A kunai was held in her hands as a deep cut along her wrist quickly closed up. Fortunately, she wouldn't need to worry about bleeding out or anything due to the high-speed regeneration of the Uzumaki clan. Hell, the only legit reason she came so close to death during the QB attack was because of her body being severely weakened from both the birthing process and from Kurama being forcibly removed from her. Focusing chakra into the blood bags, they then burst open much like water balloons as the blood began to shape and take form until several perfect replicas of Kushina herself stood before her. Kami, do I love blood clones. The perfect body doubles. And unlike shadow clones, they don't expire until they are dispelled by the caster, or are killed. Alright ladies, listen up. As of now, hi, Kushina the evil Uzumaki, am now the Godame Hokage. The red-haired woman announced, earning a series of cheers from her clones. It would seem that this village is in a mess, and is in dire need of new leadership. To help keep this village going forward, I have officially disbanded both the civilian and elder councils. Sure, there's a lot more paperwork to be done with them gone, but this only means we have more control over the village's economy. Now get to work on the paperwork immediately. We have a lot of work ahead of us, Kushina shouted, prompting her blood clones to salute and begin to power through the piles of paperwork with the efficiency of a machine. With the paperwork problem out of the way, she could now see firsthand the village's workings. And since today, as marked by the calendar, was Academy Exam Day, the school for the next generation of shinobi would be a good place to start. Not to mention she could silently cheer on Naruto. And flashback. While so the whole time, the old man could have just used clones like that to do the paperwork. So much for being the professor, Naruto commented with a chuckle, finding it rather funny how the Sandame never realized he could simply cheat. No kidding. Maybe he was going senile. The evil Uzumaki replied with a dry laugh as they neared the academy, making them realize that the walk had been surprisingly short. Though they continued on as they neared Naruto's classroom, the blonde wishing that this would be the last time he'd have to endure a day within the academy. It didn't take long for them to reach the doorway to his class. The blonde opened the doorway and ushered his mother inside. As soon as they both stepped inside, the teacher Irika stared at the form of Naruto and muttered, "You're late. As such, you won't be permitted to partake in the genin exam." At this statement, the whiskered teen glanced at the clock and found that he was actually on time. He was about to call the scarred chunin on his bullshit, but his mother stepped forward. Is he? So sorry about that. Name's Kushina. Kushina Uzumaki. And I'm the new Godame Hokage, the red-haired woman announced, earning a series of gasps from the classroom, and both Iruka and his partner Mizuki stood utterly dumbfounded at this news. Uzumaki? Are you related to Naruto? And since when did you become the new Hokage? I didn't hear anything about this. The scarred chunin spoke in confusion as he glanced between the mother and son pair. Yeah, I can understand the confusion. My appointment was kind of an out-of-the-blue emergency type thing. And yes, I am Naruto-kun's mother, and before you ask, I was stuck in a coma until just recently. She spoke in utter annoyance, as she fingered the handle of her katana, almost as if she was feeling the need to cut apart something right now. The scarred chunin tried to protest Naruto being able to enter the chunin exam but was cut off by the crimson-haired woman. The bell hasn't rung just yet, so Naruto-kun is still on time. And I'm warning you right now, Mr. Unimportant Chunin, I shall be attending these exams just as well and observing your conduct, and how the exams are handled. And if I don't like what I see or find, I'll be sure to gut you just like a fish. She warned him and then drew her sword, the rusty tip of the katana pressing against the chunin's vest. That's a very poorly maintained weapon. This rusty old thing could easily break, plus rusty swords can't hold an edge anyway. Iruka spoke in his lecturing voice, finding it absurd that someone proclaiming to be Hokage would use such a useless weapon. The female Uzumaki smirked a bit, and then gave the flat of her blade a quick flick with her fingers, knocking off some of the rust and grime, revealing a bit of a shimmering blade covered with seals. Normal swords, yes? But this one I specially designed and put very specific seals on so that rust could gather freely, but not cause the blade to lose its effectiveness. Being a ninja, you should know not to judge a book by its cover. And this sword definitely has an edge. I can happily give you a demonstration as I cut off certain unneeded parts of your body. Unimportant Chunin. She spoke in a sickly sweet voice, causing the room to be consumed by a dark, dread-filled atmosphere. My name is Iruka. The teacher tried to introduce himself, but was cut off when Kushina dropped the strange doggy kennel she was holding to the floor, earning a yelp from the occupant. And then the crimson-haired woman sat atop the kennel with a bored yawn. I don't care. To me, you're just another rank-and-file Chunin without any significance. Only reason Chunin take positions as academy teachers is for easy jobs away from the realities of being a true shinobi. Now shut up and commence the exam so I can observe, the crimson-haired woman demanded, her patience already starting to run out. Who or what is in that? The scarred Chunin prepared to ask, only to notice that the tip of the katana blade was now pointed at his crotch, making his voice falter until he directed his assistant to hand out the exam papers to the students. Once the papers had been assigned to each student, the crimson-haired woman knew that this part of the exam would be largely uneventful, but this could help her size up any noteworthy students. The first student to catch her eye was most obviously her own son, who was busy scribbling down his answers, all the while hiding a smirk of amusement since he had always wanted to see Iruka properly put in his place. The second student she took note of was Sasuke Uchiha, who was sending glances of both curiosity and envy in Kushina's direction. The female Uzumaki immediately sneered in disgust upon seeing that the Uchiha didn't have the kindness or patience of his late mother Mikoto. Instead she saw that hunger and need for power, for supremacy. Just like Fugaku, typical Uchiha male. While not one to take part in misandry, most Uchiha males were nothing short of scum, and the world may have been better off without the males of the clan. The females tended to be far more composed and compassionate, whereas the males often exhibited Madara syndrome, so named after the infamous Konoha co-founder. Symptoms usually involved but were not limited to a mixed superiority/inferiority complex, lack of regard for human life, an obsessive hunger for power, and self-destructive and illogical behavior. Moving on, the next one she noticed was a girl of obvious Hyuga descent due to her pale eyes, though the lack of a covering for her forehead to hide the caged bird seal suggested she was of the main branch, likely Hayashi and Hitomi's child. The two females locked eyes together, almost as if they were giving a silent greeting to one another, until the Hyuga girl gave a small nod and resumed her work on the exam. It seemed there was more to this one, so the Uzumaki decided she might be worth observing. As the minutes began to tick by and the written exams were completed, the teachers collected the papers. With that portion of the exams done, it was now time for the jutsu half, which was the real make-or-break part of the exams. One by one, the students performed the 3 basic academy jutsu, the substitution, the henge, and the basic clone jutsu. All the while Kushina felt unsatisfied by these subpar results. She could tell by the thin frames of these students that they hadn't received much in the way of practical lessons, and worse, the academy had become a breeding ground for fangirls, as evidenced by the Uchiha's fangirls squealing when he performed the most basic of jutsu. Kushina would need to revamp the academy's curriculum to include more advanced jutsu training, elemental nature classes, hardcore taijutsu training, and of course she would need much stricter teachers. Finally, it was the turn of Naruto Uzumaki himself, who had a triumphant look on his face and spoke prepared to be amazed. He then formed a single hand sign and called out Shadow Clone Jutsu. In several puffs of smoke, at least 10 perfect copies of the whiskered teen stood behind him with their arms crossed over their chests, all sharing the same proud smirk on their faces just like the original. Iruka's eyes widened momentarily and he tightened his grip around his clipboard as if to prevent himself from dropping it. Then with a sneer the scarred Chunin spoke in a blunt manner, "You fail." At this, a huge tick mark formed on the blonde boy's head as he lunged forward, grabbing the Chunin by his vest and pulling him down to his height. The boy's sapphire blue eyes holding an intense glow to them now, almost as if they had been lit aflame. "The fuck do you mean I fail? I just fucking pulled a shadow clone jutsu. That's a goddamn high-ranking jutsu that even jonin have a hard time using." The blonde spoke angrily, his face flushing red in anger, while in the background the rest of the class quietly watched the scene unfold. Even Kushina simply looked on, eagerly waiting to see how her son would react and deal with this pompous Chunin. The rules clearly state that an academy student must use the clone jutsu. If you can't perform such a basic jutsu, then I can't allow you to pass, Iruka explained and then tried to pry the boy's hands off of his vest, only to find Naruto's grip tightening even more. "Oh yeah? That's just the problem. I literally can't use the clone jutsu. My chakra reserves are way too strong to be used for a kiddie jutsu like that. And I bet you knew that all this time, didn't you, you piece of shit?" The blonde shouted and then reared his fist back and punched the Chunin right across the jaw, earning a series of gasps from the class, and a cruel smile from Kushina. "The fuck did I do to deserve such crappy treatment? Why can't I have a fair chance like everyone else? I worked hard on the shadow clones that Anko-sama taught me, so that I could be her apprentice." The blonde shouted angrily, 3 years' worth of frustration and anger in the academy finally boiling over as the boy snapped and continued to land blow after blow on the teacher's face, some blood and teeth flying out from the teacher's mouth until the blonde wrapped his hands around Iruka's throat and started to strangle him. At this point, Mizuki snapped out of his stupor and attempted to step in, only to be tripped by the scabbard of Kushina's katana, and she planted a foot on the back of his neck to keep him pinned to the floor. After a few moments, Iruka began to turn blue in the face from the lack of air until finally Naruto scoffed and tossed him to the floor. "You aren't worth it," was all Naruto said with a huff as he crossed his arms with a look of frustration. His mother nodded with a small smile and spoke by the power vested in me as Hokage. "I say that Naruto-kun has passed the exams with flying colors." Iruka however gasped and wheezed for air as he choked out, "The little bastard tried to kill me." The scarred teacher tried to get up, only to be met with the tip of a rusty katana but a bare inch away from his face. The form of Kushina smirking in an almost feral manner. "That's right. He did. Best remember that the next time you see him, and you should also take note that I allowed him to try. Now then, I have found this batch of genin to be somewhat lackluster. It would seem we need a more thorough academy training system, and a much looser grading system. Naruto-kun? Perhaps you could share with me some details of your academy days later on. I think new teachers are needed." She spoke, earning a nod from her son as he collected a headband for himself and tied it around his arm, flipping the bird to both of the incapacitated teachers, who could only glare at the boy. With that said and done, Kushina stood up and picked up the doggy kennel. "Nice meeting you all. I look forward to being your Hokage for the foreseeable future." With that said, she gestured for her son to follow, prompting the blonde to nod as the two Uzumakis left together, earning some fearful muttering from the students. Meanwhile, out in the hall, the two Uzumakis walked side by side. The crimson-haired female chuckling as she spoke, "I'm surprised you didn't kill that man. You seemed like you really wanted to. He must have really been a thorn in your side for years." Naruto shrugged as he replied, "Yeah. I did want to. That asshole has done nothing but hold me back. But then I changed my mind. I figured that he'll be able to suffer more if I keep him alive for now." His response earned a small laugh from his mother. My. Seems you got a little sadism from me and Anko-chan. It is true that if you were to kill him, he would no longer suffer. But don't allow a possible annoyance to nip at you in the future." She replied back with a chuckle. "You know, it's kinda weird. All I ever wanted was to be a ninja, and now that I am one, where do I go from here? What kind of a goal do I set for myself?" The blonde questioned, sighing, since becoming Hokage for a village full of people that hated him for something that wasn't his fault would likely be more trouble than it was worth, though on the other hand, it would in a way be a kind of revenge. "You'll figure something out. Right now, I intend to make Konoha into a strong village," his mother proudly proclaimed with a chuckle, earning a raised eyebrow from the blonde Jinchuriki. "Isn't Konoha already strong? I mean, it's hailed as the strongest shinobi village, right?" he asked, and then Kushina let out a loud snap of her fingers as she pointed at the boy, then slowly raised her fingertip upwards and waved it from side to side, making a tsk noise. "Silly naive boy. Konoha is supposedly the strongest. However, it seems that during the Sandame's reinstatement, Konoha has really lagged behind. What people fail to realize is that peacetime is a fleeting and fragile thing, just like the seasons of the year. At any point of time, when we least expect it, we could be thrust into another war. Peacetime is the absolute best time to prepare for whatever may come our way. Remember this, Naruto-kun, even if you think you're the strongest warrior in existence, almost always someone even stronger will someday come along to challenge you. So never, ever, allow yourself to waste away in stagnation and laziness." She warned him and then gave him a small boop on the nose, followed by a kiss on the forehead, earning a chuckle from the blonde boy and a huge neon red blush on his face. "Thanks, I guess I have plenty of hardcore training to look forward to from Anko-sama." Will you be training me too? You must have lots of great techniques to teach me. Heck, I could also use some help learning to use Kurama's power. He spoke in an excited manner, quickly taking her advice to heart, and something in him felt very eager and excited to fight strong opponents in the future. Of course. I'd be delighted to teach you some tricks of the trade. Now if you'll excuse me, I have just a few more loose ends to tie up. You go back to Anko's and rest for a bit. The crimson-haired woman spoke and then vanished in a swirl of leaves, leaving Naruto by himself as he headed back home. All the while, he couldn't help but think of the things Kurama and Kushina had told him, about how the Bijou and Jinchuriki were taken advantage of to create a false peace, about needing to prepare for the future. It made him think on how messed up things were since he remembered reading about the past shinobi world wars. What were they even fought over? Land? Jutsu? Bijou? Bloodlines? He couldn't remember the exact reason. Maybe in the end there wasn't even a point to it all. Maybe the war was over some pointless squabble. His musing was broken when he stopped in front of a weapons store that his old friend Tenten worked at when she wasn't on missions. Gaining an idea, he entered the store and found the brown-haired girl behind the counter, casually cleaning some of the katanas. When she looked up, she was delighted to see the form of Naruto had come to visit her. Hey there, Naruto-kun. Good to see you again. What can I do for you? She asked him in a cheery manner, a small blush forming on her cheeks, and then she noticed that he now had a shinobi headband tied to his arm. So you finally passed the exams, huh? Your pal Anko teach you a few tricks? The bun-haired girl asked, knowing the closeness of the two pariahs. That, and I beat the snot out of Irika after he tried failing me again. The blonde admitted openly with a sheepish grin as he rubbed the back of his head. Seriously? And you got away with that? Still, I guess he did have it coming to him, she admitted, remembering full well how the Chunin teacher seemed to almost always single out the blonde over every little thing. Hell yeah, I got away with it since the Hokage was in the same room, and she so happens to be my mom. The whiskered teen replied with a small blush as he scratched at one of his whisker marks, prompting his old friend to nod and then freeze up when she registered what he had said. Wait, what did you say? She asked him, now realizing he had mentioned that the Hokage was his mother. Rumors had been circulating that a new Hokage had been placed in office, but an official village address hadn't happened yet due to the new Hokage seemingly busying herself with multiple tasks. Long story? I'll tell you about it later. Anyway, I came here to ask you if you could make custom weaponry for me. He responded in a more businesslike tone. In response, Tenten perked up at the mentioning of weaponry and slammed a massive book onto the counter which happened to be a catalog for different kinds of weapons. Sure thing. I can hook you right up. What kind of weapon are you looking for? You want something more traditional like a katana, or a staff? Or are you looking for something a bit more unorthodox? There's something for everyone here, Tenten proclaimed, going into her weapon otaku mode. Actually, I was thinking of stepping outside the norm. The blonde responded with a small smirk, earning a look of interest from the weapons specialist. She then smirked as she felt that this was going to be a somewhat difficult but worthwhile order. And she loved a good weapon-related challenge. Meanwhile, Hokage office. Kushina sat behind her new desk with a smirk, drawing up some designs for a new Uzumaki compound since their family was now an official clan of the village. And about damn time too. This compound would be set behind the Hokage mountain away from the rest of the village to allow for plentiful room to train with her son. Standing at her side was Sakura Haruno, who was busy stretching out her limbs after being kept in a doggy kennel for so long. Gone was her usual attire, and instead replaced with a white kimono with the kanji for slave embroidered on the back. A seal in the form of a choker kept wrapped tight around her neck, solidifying her new position. The crimson-haired woman looked up from her designs and spoke to a waiting group of Anbu with one Nico at the front. Are my orders understood? The former Jinchuriki asked with a small smile, earning a series of nods from the Anbu squad. They are. We shall retrieve them immediately, Nico promised, and then she and the squad vanished in a series of swirling leaves, allowing Kushina to continue her work, while her blood clones continued to work on paperwork in an adjacent room. So far they had done some serious tax cuts on shinobi goods, leveraged trade routes, had Danzo's corpse and mutated arm incinerated, and were drawing up a new academy curriculum to better train the students. Perhaps D ranks should also be delegated to academy students to help them gain work experience as well. After a few more minutes of scribbling, the door to the Hokage's office burst open, revealing Mabuki Haruno herself. The blonde woman immediately rushed towards her daughter and tightly embraced her. Oh my baby. You're safe. When your father told me that Kushina had done something to you, and Mabuki's words got caught in her throat as she sobbed, and then she pulled back and saw her daughter now had a slave collar and kimono, as well as a pair of broken fingers that were now kept in a finger brace to keep them straight so they could properly heal. What the fuck did you do to my child? Mabuki screeched, slamming her hands down on the Hokage desk, her motherly instincts overriding her fear of Kushina. Not much. All I did was break 2 fingers and she started to sing for me like a canary. Poor girl has a very low pain tolerance. Oh, and I took her as a slave for my family and soon-to-be clan. Think of it as taking collateral for all the years your husband has been meddling in my family's affairs, Kushina stated with a somewhat snark expression. Sakura's just a child. She's innocent. Don't you have any sense of morality? Mabuki stated, clenching her fists tightly into a white knuckle grip. Any sense? Honey, I have no morals whatsoever. And your daughter isn't exactly a little angel. Sakura? Tell your mommy what you told me after I broke your fingers. The crimson-haired woman spoke, earning a nod from the pinkette. My dad, Kizashi, he would always pressure me into pursuing a relationship with Sasuke Uchiha. He wanted me to marry Sasuke so that we could get into the Uchiha fortune. He also told me to hurt Naruto as often as possible, whenever possible, for any reason, and I did. I always beat up Naruto, because I thought it was fun to use him like a stress ball and I had a feeling of invincibility. If Naruto ever fought back against me, then Dad would raise hell and make him suffer. So I could do anything, and now I need to pay. I'm now a slave to repay all the harm I did to Naruto over the years. Sakura explained. When she had finished speaking, her new mistress patted the pinkette on the head as if she were a puppy. Sakura tensed up at first, but then relaxed since she was being given some affection. Good girl. There you have it. Oh, and while we're talking about Kizashi, where is the little pink-haired weasel? Kushina asked with a toothy grin, drumming her fingertips against the desk in excitement to torturing the man himself. Gone to the daimyo. To expose your tyranny. Please, I'm begging you. I'll give you anything you want. I'll do anything. Say anything. Just let my child go, Mabuki pleaded, sinking to her knees as she felt pure despair fill her heart. She had tried to be a patient and understanding mother, and obviously she spoiled and doted on her child, but maybe she should have been stricter. If she had protected Sakura more from her father's poisonous influence, maybe the girl would have been a better person. And Kunoichi, not gonna happen. No offense, Mabuki-chan, but I'm not known to be forgiving, and the way I see it, taking away Kizashi's meal ticket to the Uchiha fortune is pretty poetic justice. So long as Sakura behaves herself, I won't do anything cruel to her. Who knows? Maybe someday she can move up to being a concubine for my son? She can help produce lots of adorable grandbabies for me. The violet-eyed woman spoke with a small chuckle. At that statement, Mabuki's body began to shake violently, her desperation and rage taking over as she lunged at the Uzumaki woman. You fucking heartless bitch, she screamed out, but was then forced back when a swift kick connected to her jaw, sending her sprawling across the floor. Heartless? Sure. I'll give you that one. But if nothing else, at least I'm honest about myself, and what I do for a living. Unlike your husband who has swindled people out of their hard-earned money. Hell, back during the war, your husband would leverage sexual favors from female prisoners. Hence why I got his ass fired from the Shinobi Corps all those years ago. The crimson-haired woman spoke flatly, scratching at the side of her cheek. She then looked down and saw a blood spatter on one of her shinobi sandals, making her sneer a bit. Then a small idea came to mind. Wait, you said you'd do anything for Sakura, right? Prove it then. Lick your own blood off of my feet and sandal, the evil Uzumaki stated. The blonde trophy wife swallowed hard, and glanced at her daughter, who had an unsure and somewhat confused expression on her face. Seeing little choice, Mabuki prostrated herself in front of the Uzumaki woman and began to lick off the droplets of blood. All the while she could only think and hope that this might appease Kushina and potentially save Sakura from her fate. Tell you what, I won't release Sakura, but you will be granted visitation rights. You can come see her whenever you want to ensure she's being well treated in my family's care. I'll even let you keep your hubby's ill-earned money on one condition. The evil Uzumaki spoke with a feral grin, very much eager to ruin Kizashi's life. For let it be known, that when Kushina Uzumaki hold a grudge, she will never let it go that easily. Mabuki looked up and gulped, knowing that while Kushina was a brute, a bully, and a savage, she was a woman of her word. What condition? Was all the blonde woman could ask, prompting the crimson-haired woman to reply, all right then, listen closely. Elsewhere. Some time later. Yay! We actually won. We can pay off a lot of our debts with this money. Spoke the form of Shizen with a cheer, a pig in her arms also oinking in happiness. However, a certain Sannin was not feeling as optimistic. Tsunade was constantly looking over her shoulder, knowing that whenever she won at gambling it usually spelled out as some kind of bad omen. The bigger the payout, the worse it could get, and she had just won a pretty large sum in a poker match just recently. You're not wrong. Would be nice to get the debt collectors off our backs for a while. Maybe go somewhere nice to eat. The slug Sannin spoke to her assistant, largely to try and reassure herself that nothing was wrong, and began to cash in her prized poker chips for the needed money. Suddenly she felt her assistant tug at her shoulder, making the blonde woman reply, almost done, Shizen. Hey, we haven't been to a hot spring in a while, yeah? Would be nice to soak in and relax. Tsunade-sama? We have company now. Shizen spoke in a worried tone, followed by a small whine from Taunton. What? The debt collectors here already? Tell them that I just won some money. I can pay off some of my debts in just a minute. The Sannin spoke in a dismissive manner as she waited for her prized money to be handed over. It's not debt collectors. It's Umbu. The black-haired woman stated, making her sensei perk up and blubber. Wait. What? Upon turning around, the Sannin saw a squad of Umbu with a purple-haired female wearing a cat mask standing at the front of the group. Numerous civilians began backing away in case there was any trouble. Nico stepped forward a bit, and then spoke in a professional manner. Tsunade Senju, Shizen Kato. You are hereby ordered to return to Konoha. Effective immediately, by the authority of the new Godame Hokage. The two women looked at one another, not having heard yet about a new Hokage, so this was indeed news for them. Godame? Who's the Godame? Jiraiya finally step up? Or maybe Kakashi? What about Mato Guy? The slug Sannin asked out of curiosity, wondering who had the stones to take the same coveted position that had robbed her of many friends and family that had either taken the title or sought after it. For a moment, it seemed almost as if Nico was grinning behind her mask as she bluntly replied Kushina, the evil Uzumaki. At the very mentioning of the name, the entire area fell deathly quiet. The numerous civilians all paled until they were deathly white. Even Tsunade and Shizen couldn't help but tremble in terror at that name. The name that was the secret fear of the elemental nations. This is all a joke, right? She's dead. Kushina's dead. Tsunade tried to deny it. But the Anbu shook their heads negatively. Anbu don't deal in jokes. If you refuse to return, then we shall have to inform Kushina-sama of your poor decision, and then she will need to list you both as rogue ninja. Your names and pictures will be put in the bingo book, and large bounties shall be placed on you. The only reason you have been allowed so much freedom is because Sandaime-sama had always been soft on his students, the Sannin. That ends today, Nico spoke in a chilly voice, prompting both the Sannin and her student to start whispering amongst one another. Tsunade-sama, running from debt collectors is one thing. But this is Kushina. She doesn't make idle threats. And we can't spend our days running from bounty hunters, Shizen warned her sensei in an urgent tone. The Busta Sannin sighed in defeat and nodded as she replied, yeah. This would be one fight with no hope of winning. If nothing else, we can at least see what it is she wants. The black-haired woman nodded in agreement as the two faced the Anbu again. Okay. We'll go. Tsunade reluctantly agreed, crossing her arms beneath her impressive bust. Good choice. Not that you had one to begin with, Nico stated with some humor in her voice as they all departed back to Konoha. Unknown to them, a local news reporter had been listening the whole time and was furiously scribbling down notes. If Kushina was now the new Godame, and was now teaming up with Tsunade Senju, this could be the kind of news that could shoot him up the corporate ladder. And news like this would inevitably spread across the entire elemental nations like wildfire. End chapter. Chapter 4, Origins of the Evil Uzumaki. In the Hokage office, Kushina had just gotten a report that Nico and her squad had just made contact with Tsunade and her apprentice Shizen and were already on the way back to Konoha with all haste. Now the evil Uzumaki was preparing her official inauguration speech so that she may finally announce herself as the new Hokage of Konoha. Granted, she should have done that sooner, but there was so much work to be done. Not to mention there was also that prick Kizashi, scuttling around like a cockroach and no doubt kissing up to the daimyo to depose her. Fortunately, she'd already taken some steps in making sure that she'd be able to crush that pink-haired degenerate underfoot. The Godame's musing was broken when she heard her new slave approaching nervously, carrying a tray of tea and snacks for the Hokage. Sakura carefully placed them onto the desk and then began pouring the tea into a cup for her new mistress, making Kushina smirk a bit. Glad you caught on to be a slave so quickly. Saves me a lot of time in having to train you. Finish up by tossing the Hokage portraits in the trash, then you can go home to see your mom. The crimson-haired woman requested, earning a nod from the pinkette. Thank you, Kushina-sama. Can I ask you a question? Or two? Sakura asked as she proceeded to take down the portraits for disposal. The pinkette had quickly found out that the best way to avoid being painfully punished was to keep her head down and do whatever her new mistress commanded. She knew of her intentions to keep her as a possible concubine for her son Naruto, and the thought of being used as a pleasure slave made her a little ill, but Naruto wasn't a bad person, so it shouldn't be all bad. That aside, she admittedly knew absolutely nothing about her new mistress as a person, save that people are terrified of her. Ask away. I've nothing to hide, unlike some people I know or knew, the crimson-haired woman replied bluntly, and also hinting towards the now-deceased Danzo, who was deeply connected to the dark underbelly of Konoha, and should have been killed years ago. Why does my dad hate you so much? Why are you called the evil Uzumaki? And why are people so scared of you? Sakura asked plainly, wanting to know more about this mysterious woman who had seemingly popped up out of nowhere and began terrifying people almost as though she were some kind of ghost. With a smirk, the crimson-haired woman set down her pen to take a break from writing out her speech and replied in a tone of amusement, now those are pretty good questions, aren't they? Well, my story starts off something like this. Years earlier, she won't quit giving me that stink eye, muttered Akumo Jonin as he glanced back at a bound Kushina who was heatedly glaring at him in defiance. If she had the power, she would have definitely set him ablaze by now with just her gaze. Just ignore her. We're almost at the border, spoke a second Kumo Nin as he shoved the girl forward, not seeing her slowly dropping strands of her crimson hair to leave as a breadcrumb trail. Why is this little bitch so special anyway? She doesn't look that important, the first one asked, getting more and more irritated by Kushina's constant staring. What are you? Stupid? Look at her hair. She's from the Uzumaki clan, not many of them left anymore. Plus, she's gotta be the Kyubi Jinchuriki, only Uzumakis can contain that kind of power. The second Jonin answered with a proud grin, Once they brought her to Kumo, they would be very richly rewarded for this contribution to Kumo's already impressive military might. A small scoff came from Kushina as she finally spoke for the first time. Must feel really proud of yourselves, huh? A bunch of punk-ass adults ganging up and kidnapping a kid, bringing her to a village where rape has been legalized. I hope you all burn in hell. Hell is exactly where you're going, kid. We're gonna strap you down and have fun fucking that sweet little of yours to help make future Jinchuriki. In this world we live in, there's only victors and victims. And a little helpless thing like you was born to be a victim, spoke a third jonin as he cupped her chin in his hand only for her to pull back and bite down hard on his hand. The jonin yelled out in pain as he pulled his hand away and then threw a punch towards the girl's face. You fucking bitch. I'll teach you not to mess with the Kumo jonin, he shouted and began to unbuckle his belt and proceeded to lower his pants, pinning the girl to the ground as he tried to tear off her clothes. The Uzumaki kicked and wriggled, putting up as much fight as she could while the other jonin looked on and laughed at her pathetic struggles. Kushina grit her teeth as red began to fill her vision, her fight-or-flight instincts taking over as she screeched and then lunged forward, slamming her forehead into the nose of her would-be rapist. The sounds of cartilage crunching as the jonin screamed out, clutching his broken nose. The ropes binding her hands behind her back snapped apart as she threw herself onto the jonin, her teeth sinking into the flesh of his neck. Blood began to fill her mouth as her teeth cut into his throat, and then she yanked her head back, tearing out a large chunk of flesh. Blood sprayed out, dousing her in the crimson liquid. Spitting out the chunk of human flesh, she stared coldly at the other jonin who could only stare in horror. Then she pounced and nothing but the sounds of flesh tearing and blood-curdling screams filled the woods. Minutes later, drip, 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 were the sounds that could be heard in the dead of night as the girl stood quietly amongst a group of corpses, blood pooling around her mouth and crimson droplets falling from her knuckles, her fists shaking as she stared at the ground. Her violet-colored eyes locked onto a crimson pool that reflected the light of the moon. The girl, known as Kushina Uzumaki, continued to stare off into space until she spoke to herself. There are only victors and victims in this world. One would think that a little girl like her would be sobbing, crying, or quivering in horror at the gruesome scene. But instead, the young Kushina's face was nothing but a blank canvas. Her musing was broken when she heard movement as a Kumo nin began to crawl away, desperately trying to escape. The young girl picked up a large rock and stalked towards the injured ninja, raising the stone into the air, preparing to crush the man's head. He looked up with some tears in his eyes, a hand raised in surrender as he began to plead for his life. No. Please. Just let me go. I have a wife. A child. I just want to see them again. He then reached into his clothes and pulled out a photograph of himself, standing with a woman holding a baby in her arms. However, his pleas fell on deaf ears as Kushina quickly brought the rock down, smashing his head and splitting it open. Then she raised it up and brought it down again, and again until his head was nothing but a pool of blood, crimson mush and bits of bone. If you cherished them, you would have stayed in Kumo instead of kidnapping girls, Kushina coldly muttered as she tossed the rock aside and then grabbed the deceased man's ninja tool pouch. She then sighed and thought back on the events that led up to this moment. She had to do it in this world. It is kill or be killed. They would have raped her over and over again, forcing her to be bred like a prize pig or some other kind of cattle. Then when she became barren, and useless to them, would have been thrown away like trash. Something inside of the young Kushina snapped as she looked down at her bloodied hands, her lips twitching upwards into a cruel and twisted smile. Looking back on it, she now realized why Yuza had fallen, relying on the help of a village that never came to aid them. Sure, they held their own against a large coalition of enemies, but to rely on others was nothing short of weakness. No one came to save Yuzu, and no one came to save little Kushina. She saved herself. The only one she could rely on was herself. She would never let herself become a victim, she would become strong. Stronger than anyone. No one would dare mess with her. Even if she needed to throw aside her humanity and become something less than human, she would gladly do it. For only victors and victims exist in this world. With a chuckle, Kushina began to loot the corpses for anything that might be of use and naturally found some shuriken, kunai, ninja wire and such things on hand. Getting an idea, she decided to send Kumo a warning. While humming a tune, she began to scalp the deceased ninjas one by one, gripping their hair and then cutting at the hairline with a saw-like motion until she ripped off their scalps with one good tug. With that done, she hanged the bodies from the trees using the ninja wire, leaving the corpses to limply dangle in the air. Another thing she had found on the bodies were some scraps of paper and a pen, and then wrote a clear message for anyone who so happened to find the bodies. Satisfied with her handiwork, she departed back to Konoha, eager to train as no one had ever trained before in the Forest of Death. Some time later, a Kumo border patrol found the bodies of their fellow ninjas being picked apart by the crows, the sight of their missing scalps causing some to lose their breakfast. And amongst the bodies, the letter was clearly put on display, with the letters being a mixture of blood and ink that read, "I was almost a victim of the legalized rape made by Kumo. I have decided to counteract this evil, with evil. Anyone that dares cross me or my friends and family, shall pay in blood. And I will collect that debt with extreme and unforgiving prejudice." Signed, Kushina Uzumaki. After the incident, Kumo made no further attempts to kidnap the now dubbed evil Uzumaki. Back in Konoha, many hailed Kushina as a hero for escaping her captors and making it back alive, though the crimson-haired girl didn't much feel like a hero. She just did what she had to do to save herself. Though unknown to many, they had no idea just what kind of monster they now had amongst them. Some years later. I hate this fucking country. It always rains here, muttered a now older Kushina who was now a jonin in her early 20s, grumbling each time she took a step as she felt the waterlogged mud squish between her toes. She really hated the same country, but orders were orders, and she had a job to do. After stomping through some more mud, she approached a gate with a small door built into it. She knocked on the door and waited for a moment until a tiny window slid open, allowing the guard on the other side to peer through at her. Password? The guard asked in a gruff voice, making Kushina's eyes twitch a bit in annoyance. How about you take your password and shove it straight up your asshole? Now let me the fucking some. Kushina answered in a mixture of amusement and mock annoyance. The window snaped shut, and some sounds of locks being undone were heard as the door opened, revealing Tsum and her partner Kuramaru, who was still but a small pup. Now there's the Kushina I know and love. How do you know it was me? The canine Kunoichi asked as she ushered in her friend and then gave her a hug, to which the crimson-haired Kunoichi returned in kind, feeling grateful that a friend was here in this godforsaken country. Wet dog smell. And you didn't do a good job of disguising your voice. Kushina teased, making her friend smack her shoulder. The Uzumaki's eyes narrowed as she looked over Tsum's shoulders and saw that this place was a prison meant to keep prisoners of war, many of which seemed to be from either Kumo or IWA, plus a few from Kiri here and there, judging from the headbands. From the looks of it, they hadn't yet noticed her presence, otherwise they'd be pissing themselves or cowering in fear. Tsum separated the hug and spoke, welcome to AIM. The ass end of nowhere, with rain, mud, and lots of war orphans. Definitely the most depressing country in the elemental nations. I'm surprised you got sent all the way out here to the sticks, instead of fighting on the front lines. Word is, you traded blows with the Sandame Rakage and then punted him across the battlefield like a football. That story spread around already? Well, that's not too far off from the truth. I actually blasted him away with a Rasengan. Bastard was fast and strong, like some kind of monster, and tough too. I can see why he managed to fight the Hachibi to a standstill. Too bad I'm a monster in my own right, and I'm much meaner and nastier. Kushina replied with a chuckle, finding it amusing how her exploits would often become famous, making her perhaps one of the most infamous kunoichi in Konoha. No shit. So what brings you all the way out to our humble little prison? The canine kunoichi asked with a small smile, though she could only guess that it was for business purposes. While Minato covers the front lines, Sandame-sama wants me to take care of some problems in our prisons. It seems that our inmates are getting a little uppity, and not taking their Konoha captors seriously. I'm here to make sure that things run smoothly until this goddamn war is over. Now, be a good girl and direct me to whoever is in charge of this place. I don't want to be here any longer than I need to, not when there is killing and murder to be done. Kushina explained, earning a nod from the brown-haired kunoichi since this was undoubtedly a job best left to her since Minato didn't have the needed mindset or air of authority to take control of a prison. A/N, play God's Gonna Cut You Down. By Johnny Cash. With a grin, Tsum motioned for her crimson-haired friend to follow her, with Kuramaru yapping excitedly as he followed his partner. The evil Uzumaki trained behind her longtime friend, passing by the rows of inmates who finally took notice of her presence. The prisoners began to immediately back away to give her as wide a berth as possible, knowing her reputation for murder, maiming, and torture. As she passed them by, she would look at them coldly, as though they were all nothing but annoying bugs for her to squash. It was almost like she didn't even view them as people, and they all knew it too, since many of them had either lost a friend or a member of family to her. Stories of Kushina's cruelty were well known throughout the nations, and they all knew that if the evil Uzumaki was here, someone is going to die. And music. The crimson-haired kunoichi entered the tent of the shinobi currently in charge of the prison, and inwardly groaned to find one Kizashi Haruno inside with his feet propped up onto the desk. Kushina, to see you, sir. Tsum almost choked out the last part, always finding it difficult to address a creep like the pink-haired man with respect. But the bastard was in charge for now. Ah. Thank you, Tsum-chan. You may go now. Me and Kushina-chan have some things to talk about. The Haruno replied, causing both women to cringe in disgust at being called chan by the pink-haired man, as though they were long-time friends when they really weren't. With an exhausted sigh, the Inuzuka quickly retreated out of the tent, though decided to keep within earshot in case her friend Kushina needed her, although it was unlikely she'd ever need backup. With Tsum gone, Kizashi clapped his hands and spoke, thanks for coming on such short notice, Kushina-chan. Sorry that you were called out here, but everything is under control. The Uzumaki bit her lip as she fingered her katana, finding the overly friendly behavior of the Haruno to be nothing but an annoyance. Under control, you say? That's not what the reports say. 10 escape attempts have been confirmed at this prison camp. Sandame-sama thinks you aren't able to control the prisoners, so I'm to do your job for you and set an example. The crimson-haired woman replied in a dry tone, not in the mood to play games with the Haruno. If you asked her, he'd be better off as a lawyer or political official given how crooked he is. That won't be necessary, Kushina-chan. Those reports were all greatly exaggerated. No inmates have escaped under my careful watch. The Haruno responded coolly as he laced his fingers together. Not yet at least. And your performance isn't inspiring confidence. You have files of inmates in here? She asked him as she approached a file cabinet, earning a nod of confirmation from the Haruno since he kept the names, ranks, and photos of captured inmates on file to better keep track of them. Kushina opened a cabinet and quickly scanned through some of the files, finding it comforting that the files were kept organized. At least that was one thing that pink-haired shinobi was good for. After reading over some names, Kushina closed the cabinet and began to exit the tent, prompting the Haruno to ask, "Hey, where are you going?" His question remained unanswered since she didn't bother giving any kind of response, forcing the pink-haired man to get up from his seat and follow her back outside, where he found her standing in front of the prison yard, with every single prisoner and Konoha ninja looking in her direction. "Inmates, assemble!" Kushina barked out, prompting the inmates to line up and stand at attention, their shinobi background enabling them to quickly assemble with their military training. Once they had finished, the crimson-haired woman called out, "When I call your name, step out to the front and line up in a row." With that, Kushina began to call out names one by one. The numerous inmates, all wondering what she wanted these people for. After calling out the names of 10 prisoners, who had all lined up in front of the Uzumaki, she gave them a nod of thanks. "Appreciate the cooperation. Makes my job easier." She spoke, and then without warning, she drew her rust-covered katana and lopped off the heads of the 10 prisoners in one smooth motion before shaking her blade again. The bodies fell to the ground like puppets with their strings severed, with at least 2 heads rolling to the feet of the other prisoners, who all stared with horror in their eyes. In recent weeks, there has been at least 10 confirmed escape attempts. I do not know who is involved, and I don't have the patience to conduct a thorough investigation. My being here is a major inconvenience for me. So, I decided to choose 10 random inmates to murder, who may or may not have been a part of the past escape attempts. If there is another, I will take 20 inmates. And if another happens, I shall take 40. And so on. So ask yourselves for a brief moment, will I be next? Kushina announced to the prisoners with full authority. They all knew in an instant that if they tried to escape yet again, they could be next. Kushina didn't just kill because it was her job, but because she wanted to. If she felt like it, she could easily murder each and every one of them just for annoying her. "Somebody clean this shit up before it starts to stink." The red-haired woman spoke and gestured towards the bodies as blood mixed with the mud and rain water. "Point well made, Kushina-chan." Kizashi spoke begrudgingly, feeling that Kushina had taken things a bit too far. "It's war. I'm a kunoichi. Murder is pretty much in the official job description." The Uzumaki replied bluntly, wanting to leave AIM as quickly as possible, feeling that things should quiet down now that the inmates no longer seemed willing to gamble with their lives due to her warning and demonstration. "If you don't mind, I'm going to find someplace relatively dry to sleep and head out in the morning. I fucking hate all this rain." Kushina continued to speak and then began to walk away, only to stop when she heard a scream belonging to a young girl. Turning around, she saw a girl with blue hair being dragged through the mud by a pair of Konoha ninja, bringing her towards Kizashi. "Enemy spy caught, sir. We found her sneaking around outside," one of the ninjas announced, while the pink-haired man licked his lips in a malicious manner, causing Kushina to quirk up an eyebrow. "I'm not a spy. Please just let me go. I only wanted some food," the girl cried out in terror as she struggled a bit in the grip of her captors. The Haruno knelt down and cupped her cheek, looking at her face intently as though he were inspecting her. With a satisfied nod, he released the girl and spoke, "Take her for interrogation. I'll question this little spy myself." The Uzumaki immediately sensed his intentions and put a hand on his shoulder, squeezing tightly until the sounds of bone cracking could be heard, making the Haruno yelp out in pain. His eyes were the same as the many Kumonin that Kushina had murdered, most specifically like the ones she had first killed. They had that same lust and hunger in them. She knew what he was, and she wouldn't let him do it to a young girl, spy or not. "No. I will question the girl. You touch her again, and I will kill you. Consequences be damned." Kushina warned the Haruno, making him gulp a bit, but he nodded in compliance all the same. She then released his shoulder and followed the 2 ninjas to the interrogation cell, who were now cuffing the girl to the table. Even as she cried and sobbed and begged them to let her go, but they ignored her pleas. Kushina then gestured for them to leave, allowing for her and the girl to be alone. The poor thing still quivering like a leaf in the wind while crying in fear. "Do you know who I am?" Kushina asked in a dispassionate tone. If this girl was a spy, she would find out one way or another. The girl looked up to the crimson-haired woman and shook her head no to the question, making the Uzumaki smirk a bit as she asked, "Does the name the evil Uzumaki ring a bell or two?" At her second question, the girl had a look of realization as she tensed up, her face turning a pure white color like a certain Sannin. You're her, aren't you? I've heard stories. They say you carve up your enemies and turn them into meat, then you cook their flesh over an open fire and eat them. Are you going to eat me?" the girl asked with a fresh stream of tears spilling down her face. Kushina inwardly sweat dropped, unsure of how such wild stories got started, though she made no attempts to stop them since they made people, most specifically her enemies, all the more terrified, and thus added to her legend. "Haven't decided yet. So, tried to change my mind." "What's your name, girl?" the red-haired woman asked in a sickly sweet tone, making the girl shiver a bit. Conan. My name is Conan. Please just let me go. I only wanted a little food, the girl pleaded with a doe-eyed look that would make most women, and even men, melt from the pure cuteness. Fortunately for Kushina, she being a trained sociopath was able to turn off any and all emotions. Instead, she grabbed the Conan girl's hands and began to inspect them. No calluses or blisters. No scarring from shinobi training. Some paper cuts, either you are an avid reader or practice origami. Skin pigment typical of an AIM resident due to lack of sunlight leading to paleness. You have any brothers? Kushina asked at the end, making the girl tense up and avert her eyes a bit. And no, it's just me. I'm alone. Conan replied, causing the crimson-haired woman to frown a bit and release the girl's hands. Kushina knew she couldn't have been alone, since there were some orange hair strands in the shoulder area of her clothes, and they didn't seem to be from an animal. Now Conan, I don't like it when people lie to me. You ever play five-finger fillet? The Uzumaki asked as she pulled out a kunai, placing the tip between the girl's fingers. The brunette looked ready to yank her hand back, but a dirty look from the redhead warned her not to. You'd better hope I don't lose my concentration. Of course, if you were to tell me about your brother or brothers I could stop, the redhead offered, but was only met with the amber-eyed stare of the girl. With a smirk, she lifted up the kunai and began to slowly bring down the tip between the girl's fingers, making a tapping noise. After a few moments, Kushina sped up, jabbing the kunai in the space between Conan's digits, causing her to dryly swallow as she watched the tip chip at the wood of the table, while silently praying she wouldn't lose her fingers. And then, Kushina sped up again until the kunai became a blur as she wildly stabbed between Conan's fingers. Terrified, the girl clenched her eyes shut, waiting for the torture to end, but still she couldn't put Yahiko and Nagato in any danger, especially if it meant selling them out to this crazy woman. I have nothing to say to you, Conan squeaked out, and then a loud slam was heard, making her jump in her seat, but she felt no pain in her hand and fingers. Carefully opening one eye, she saw that the spaces between her fingers had been worn down and chipped apart, but her fingers were left unscathed, the kunai embedded between her pinky and ring fingers. I like you, Conan. You didn't sell out your family. Not even under threat against Whelmy. If there were more people like you, that would protect their family as you just did, the world might be better off. Guards, the crimson-haired woman barked out, prompting a pair of shinobi to burst in, ready for her orders. Release the girl. Give her a week's worth of rations and send her on her way. As for Kazashi, tell him he's relieved of duty. She spoke, causing one guard to immediately begin unlocking the cuffs on the girl. On what charge for Kazashi-san? The second guard asked with a raised eyebrow, prompting the red-haired woman to slam her knee into his groin, his eyes nearly bugging out from the pain now in his loins. Any charge I fucking feel like, was all Kushina answered as she shoved the shinobi away as he clutched his groin. It wasn't long before Conan walked out with a duffel bag full of rations, giving a bow of thanks to the red-haired woman. Thank you, I owe you a lot, Kushina-sama. Someday I hope to repay your kindness. The brunette spoke with a wide smile since she now had some food to bring back to Yahiko and Nagato. The red-haired woman then smirked and ruffled the girl's hair. Take care, kid. And remember, there are only victors and victims in this world. Never let yourself become a victim, Kushina warned the girl, who nodded and left as quickly as possible. The Uzumaki sighed deeply with a small smile gracing her lips. She definitely wasn't a saint. She would freely admit she was a cold-blooded murderer, but it sometimes felt nice to do a good deed. Though Kushina couldn't help but wonder if she had damned that girl to more pain and suffering. After all, life itself was cruel and unforgiving. To live is to suffer. Every single day an uphill battle for survival, but still she hoped to end this stupid war and make the world a little brighter for when she would birth her first child. She wanted her first child to be raised in a time of peace, free of want and desire. To aid in her quest of rebuilding their clan to its former glory if her child is a boy, but for now that dream seemed so far off. She could only wish her child wouldn't need to suffer as she had over the years. To become a trained sociopath, to become a killer, Kushina had to give up much of herself, sacrificing her morals, her innocence, until she learned how to turn off her emotions like flipping a light switch. To kill without feeling was both a blessing and a curse. She didn't feel guilty for the people she had murdered, but at the same time she had found it to be easy. Too easy. She didn't see any end in sight for her, to hang up her katana and live a life of peace. But still, she would continue to her evil ways. Even if she had to murder 1,000, or 1,000,000 people, even if she had to tear down nations, or be hailed as pure evil, it would all be worth it for the sake of her clan's future. And nothing would get in her way. End flashback. Present time. So my dad was a creepy sexual predator? Sakura asked with a gulp, feeling bad for that poor Conan girl who could have been a potential victim if her mistress hadn't stepped in. Yeah. Turns out he was leveraging sexual favors from some female prisoners for better living conditions and food. Sometimes he'd take advantage of passing refugees looking for food and shelter. Bastard knew who to keep close, and to keep away from his escapades. He was stripped of his headband and kicked out of the shinobi force. Made a killing as a lone shark and then pretty much bought his way into the shinobi council. He's been a perpetual thorn in my side ever since, and has constantly hated me. Never came around to killing him, though I probably should have. I thought I castrated him by crushing his testicles, which didn't seem to work since he somehow made you. Guess I enjoyed tormenting him too much for my own good. Kushina explained with a lazy yawn as she continued to write out her speech. What happened to that Konan girl? You ever see her again? Sakura asked as she finished putting the Hokage portraits into the trash to finish up her duties, hoping to see her mother soon. Konan? She and 2 other boys trained under Jiraiya for a bit till they learned to take care of themselves. Me and the old bastard kept tabs on them for a while. They led a rebellion against Hanzo the Salamander. One of the boys, kid called Yahiko, died. The others kinda dropped off the radar. Far as I know, I think they're still out there somewhere. I never assume someone is dead unless I see a corpse for myself, or it is irrefutable that they're really dead, the red-haired Hokage explained with a tired sigh. Anyways. Go on. Get out of here already. Say hi to your mom for me, I haven't named you, stuff like that. The Godame spoke while making a shooing motion with her hand. The Pinkette bowed in thanks and then spoke. You know, you might be a bully, but I don't think you're a bad person. Wrong, Pinkie Pie. I'm rotten to the core. I'm the evil Uzumaki for a reason. I only told you a bit about my past. I've got war stories up the wazoo that'll make you piss yourself and turn that bubblegum pink hair if yours into pure silver. Trust me, if I told you about some of the nastier stuff you'd be having nightmares for years to come. And have you seriously forgotten how I broke your fingers? Now you're trying to be all buddy-buddy with me? What the fuck are you? An anime character? Kushina retorted, refusing Sakura's compliment, and questioning the girl's sanity. Without a word further, the Pinkette bowed and left to go see her mother for the rest of the day. Upon leaving, the Uzumaki woman sighed deeply as she sank into her seat, feeling that in some ways she had failed her son. For her it wasn't that long ago that he was in her belly, and she had given birth to him. Now he was a teenager who grew up with no influence of a parent. Oh, Naruto-kun, I'd sacrifice anything to turn back the clock and give you the childhood you deserved, but I can't. Best I can do is make up for lost time now. She muttered to herself as she resumed her work. Unknown to her, for the brief moment word of her return was spreading across the nations. Meanwhile, IWA. In the office of the Tsuchikage, Anoki sighed as he finished the last of his paperwork for the day, and was eager to read about the latest article of the newspaper. As he flipped open the paper and began reading the front page, his eyes bugged out of his head. A sickening crack was heard, followed by a yowl of pain. Gah! My back! Anoki yelled out as he collapsed to the floor, a foamy substance coming out of his mouth as he passed out while blue in the face. The Sandaime Tsuchikage was later found unconscious with an expression of pure horror on his face, and immediately called that it was time to head to Konoha. Kumo. The Reikage was busy with his daily workout routine, lifting a set of dumbbells after finishing out the duties of paperwork. Although he wished he knew a jutsu to finish it faster so he could train longer, he was interrupted when the doors to his office burst open, revealing the form of his brother Killer B, who was babbling some kind of nonsense, with Mabui and Team B following close behind. Our apologies, Asama. But Sensei seems to have gotten worked up over something. Samui spoke apologetically while trying to make some sense of what was happening as her sensei continued to speak in some inane gibberish. What the hell are you trying to say, B? Is that jargon supposed to be some kind of new rapping style of yours? Speak! I command you to speak, demanded as he tossed aside the large dumbbell and approached his brother, who thrust a newspaper into his chest. Growing curious, the Yondaime Reikage looked at the front page, which seemed to have been crumpled in his brother's grip, and then let out a war cry as he ripped the newspaper in half. Batten down the hatches. Assemble the entire shinobi corps of Kayamo. Prepare for an S-rank emergency. Impose martial law stat, the Reikage bellowed, as he slammed his fists together. What? Reikage Dano? Are we under some kind of attack? Mabui asked as she jotted down his orders, wondering what was causing the two brothers to behave like this. We might be. Brother. Mabui. Team B. We are making an emergency visit to Konoha. Tell Darui that he's in charge until I return. If SHE has returned, we need to make peace and fast. Somebody find Yujito. We may need her too, the Reikage shouted with multiple tick marks appearing on his head that looked ready to burst at any moment. Kiri. Congratulations on your new appointment, Mei-sama. Spoke the form of AO to the newly minted Godame Mizukage. Mei Terumi, who was a central figure in the Kiri rebels who had finally deposed her predecessor, Yagura, after a long and brutal civil war that had cost the lives of many people, civilian, shinobi and otherwise. Mei muttered as she stared at the newspaper in her hands while sipping at some coffee. Rebuilding won't be easy. And Kiri doesn't have a positive reputation amongst the villages. It will be difficult gaining any sort of humanitarian aid. AO continued to speak with a tired sigh, knowing that the restoration of Kiri was going to be a long and arduous road. Mei responded again, obviously distracted by whatever article she was reading in the papers. AO narrowed his visible eye a bit and decided to test and see if she was actually paying attention. Perhaps a political marriage is in order? I hear that the daimyo of Kiri is very eager to meet. His sentence was cut off as he felt a dark and sinister aura come from the Mizukage that gave him a chilling smile. AO? If you don't stop pestering me, I'll kill you. I was just in the middle of reading something interesting. It would seem that a certain person has become the new Godame Hokage. Come. We must go to Konoha, immediately. Mei spoke as she set aside her newspaper. Konoha? That may not be wise out of all the villages. Our relations with Konoha may be the worst of them all. Ao lamented, wondering what was going through the lava user's head. Have a little bit of faith, Ao. You may be pleasantly surprised. Was all Mei said as she gave a haughty laugh. Oto, so Kushina lives then. I knew that woman was too stubborn to die. Word was, she died after the Kyuubi attack. I can only suspect that old warhawk Danzo had something to do with her disappearance. Out of all the people that could have become Hokage, she is the worst. Orochimaru spoke in annoyance as he tossed aside his newspaper. If word had reached the international newspapers, it wouldn't be long before Kushina herself realizes that people are now aware of her presence unless she had been counting on that. What do you mean by that? Just what kind of kunoichi are we talking about? I have only heard wild tales and stories about her exploits, like how she butchered a platoon of Kumo-nin, painted the field crimson with their entrails and then fed their bodies to some pigs to be shipped to Kumo. Kabuto spoke, finding such a story ridiculous only to notice a glare from his master. Trust me, those stories? Whether they be totally outlandish or embellished, always hold some truth to them. Kushina was amongst the most violent kunoichi to ever live. Some say she is actually a monster, wearing the skin of a human female. Regardless of whatever form of fiction exists, the cold hard truth is that she is a woman unafraid to do whatever she needs to do, in order to get what she wants, although violence seems to be her go-to solution. Towards the end of the Shinobi War, she had the entirety of the nations in stranglehold of fear. No one could even utter her name without shuddering if terror. Even the Kages knew better than to cross her, for fear of her tearing down their villages out of petty vengeance. She was larger-than-life Kabuto, and unlike many tyrants and self-proclaimed villains in history, she is fully capable of destroying the nations as we know it. I can only imagine that the other nations will be clamoring to gain her favor and to get in her good graces before she has the chance to think about destroying them. Orochimaru explained grimly, knowing he wasn't a match for the Uzumaki even with his full might. Then how are we to destroy her? Surely she's not invincible. The spectacled ninja spoke with a small chuckle. Hard to say, but I do have one potential weapon that could give us the edge we need to defeat her. Hopefully we aren't too late, because if she sets her sights on us there will be nothing we can do to stop her. Best to strike while we still have the element of surprise. The Sannin replied as he turned towards a series of coffins. Suna, Gaia hahaha. I know that crazy bitch. She's a monster. You don't want to go messing around with her, spoke a voice inside of Gaara's mind, the Jinchuriki now clasping his head in pain as he heard Shikaku cackling inside of his mind. Mother? What are you talking about? You've been screaming nonsense since you saw that newspaper through my eyes, Gaara muttered, wondering what may have caused his mother to start acting up like this. After a few moments of silence, the one-tailed Bijou replied to answer your question with another question. What do you think's gonna happen now that a true monster has returned? It's going to happen soon, you know. Shikaku answered with a chuckle, the tone of which the Bijou spoke sounded like it was waiting for something to happen. Is there anyone at the top now? Who's ruling these lands now? The daimyos? The kages of the nations? Or is it Jinchuriki like yourself, scratching out an existence as living weapons now? Some strong people are rising up and appearing throughout the world, and that crazy lady is one of them, just waiting to throw the world upside down. That clan has been hiding in the shadows of history, and its new resurgent has finally appeared. The natural enemies of the gods has returned. Soon the ultimate battle for supremacy shall begin. That accursed bloodline will soon be dragged down through the mud and cast into darkness. The number of shinobi throughout this world has been expanding steadily over the years. The Shodame Hokage didn't end the wars, he just made them more organized. He didn't hold on to power, he gave it away. My brothers and sisters all knew this day would come. Gaara! The throne wars are on the horizon, Shikaku screamed out with fiendish glee, making the red-haired Sunanin clutch his head in pain. Not even hearing his siblings calling out that they were to head for Konoha. All the while, Gaara couldn't help but wonder what his mother was talking about. Konoha, thanks Tenten. It's perfect. Naruto spoke as he gave a few practice swings of his new scythe that had a skeletal appearance. The bun-haired girl could only nod in satisfaction of her handiwork. No problem. Took me a while to get it to your specifications. Did you get the design from a certain manga starring a certain demonic butler? She asked with a snarky expression, earning a sheepish grin from the whiskered teen. Before he could reply, he tensed up and looked out the window towards the sky, feeling like something on the winds had changed. Whisperings of a nameless fear being carried through the empty air, and from within his seal, Kurama stirred and spoke. It has begun. The throne wars. Naruto? Is something wrong? Tenten asked worriedly since the blonde seemed distracted for some reason. Dunno. I just got a funny feeling. Like something really bad is going to happen. And there's not going to be any stopping it. Naruto replied with his eyes narrowed a bit. What was it that the Kyuubi meant by throne wars? What throne? What war? Why? Regardless, he couldn't shake a gut feeling that something was about to happen. He would need to pay his mother a visit and begin training, quickly. End chapter 4. What if neglected Naruto x possessive anko, And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.